Chapter 1191. I'm rooting for Xinyuan Hongyu, the leader of LZX. At night, after Jiang Shao absorbed 999 diamond disaster ruin star beads, he did not dare to absorb the last one directly. Instead, he adjusted it. First, he sent Wei Yu and the others back to rest. Then, he made a trip to North America. In the middle of the night, he woke up the entire village. In the Calamity Shadow World, Birch Forest, Dancing Soul City, and Yigu Tower all had Jiang Zhao's bait. He could directly tell the creatures there what to pay attention to. The newly stationed chessboard army, on the other hand, had a portion of their chessboards hidden deep underground, but it did not matter. They were all stone people anyway, and their defense was so strong. Finally, Jiang Shao brought second last to the teaching block of the Liaodong Land Northern Military Academy. Under second last's gaze, Jiang Shao absorbed the last star bead. All of a sudden, a piece of information appeared in the internal star map. The dimensional rift has leveled up. Scorching Yang grade. The ruins of Calamity's shadow have leveled up. Scorching Yang grade. Jiang Shao was stunned. Jiaoyang? Not Jiaoyang? Blazing Sun? Yin-yang? Zhuoyang? What does that mean? The conditions have been met. Full star slots. Awarded skill points. 80,000. Jiang Zhao's breath stagnated. What the F***? Full? Are you sure? Is it really full? Isn't he going to close the internal star map and make adjustments after reaching a higher level of astral power? Was Jiao Yang the highest quality? So brass, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, star, candle moon, scorching Sunday. A total of 8 levels? Jiang Shao was shocked. Have I finally graduated? He pondered for a while and lit up his star map. This time, second last did not squint her eyes. It was because Jiang Zhao's 9-star map, which used to be dazzling, had a background of star power that was once composed of aquamarine. There was also a starry sky behind the 9-star array formed by the 9-star slot. Each time it opened, there would be stars shining resplendently, dazzling everyone. But now, the background of the 9 stars array changed, turning into a fiery red. To be exact, it was a dark red. It was similar to the red of the afterglow of sunset, the red of the burning clouds in the sky at dusk. Even the color of the star map has changed? Just because of one star slot? The star slots of the candlelight moon quality were not that capable. Second last tilted her head and stared at Jiang Zhao's star map that was once filled with twinkling stars. But now, she could only see a few dim stars that were glistening with a faint light. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to see the stars at all. The star slots of Jiang Zhao's spacetime rift and calamity ruins were no longer filled with potholes on the surface of the moon, nor were they surrounded by burning candlelight. It had become the surface of a planet with cracked earth. The surface of the moon that once belonged to the candle moon had completely turned into dry land. Looking from afar, one could almost feel the heat from the star slot. It could be said to be scorched earth, and there was no sign of life at all. Second last slowly stretched her hand out and touched the scorched sun star slot. Unsurprisingly, her long fingers penetrated the scorched earth star slot and pressed on Jiang Zhao's chest. Jiang Shao had never had a cat before and had never had his breasts stepped on before. Today, he was lucky enough to experience it for the first time. Second last retracted her palm and asked, "How do you feel?" Jiang Shao said, "It's quite comfortable." Second last was dumbfounded. Jiang Shao scratched his head and said, "My body feels warm, and I can't put my finger on it." Warm. Second last frowned slightly and carefully ruminated on Jiang Zhao's words. She continued, "The starry sky background that was supposed to be made up of blue star power has now turned into the afterglow of the setting sun. It's dark red, all because of this star slot. Your star map has undergone such a huge change. I don't think the background has changed." Jiang Shao said, "It seems that the background has really changed. I don't feel any special changes. There was a warm current just now, but it's gone now. Second last looked down at the dry and cracked scorched earth star slot and nodded gently. She said, take your time to dig. Let's see if there are any changes in your 2-star techniques first. Jiang Shao hurriedly looked at the introduction of the star techniques in his internal star map, only to feel his heart tighten. The introduction of the Calamity Ruins became Scorched Sunday Calamity Ruins. Create a Calamity universe with the Calamity World as the center. Jiang Shao was speechless. He thought about it and tried to open the Calamity space door in space, but it failed. It seemed that the space door could only be opened on the Calamity planet. After all, the introduction also mentioned that the Calamity World was the center. However, when he opened the door of the Calamity World, Jiang Shao discovered that something was amiss. He opened a space door in front of the stone villa, but he did not close it. Instead, he opened another space door. Second last said, you can open 2 space doors at the same time. Without saying a word, Jiang Shao waved his hand again and opened another space gate that was connected to the star power threads that connected the 2 space gates. Second last said, you can open 3 at the same time. Jiang Shao waved his hand again and another one appeared. Second last said, 4. Jiang Shao waved his hand again and another one appeared. Second last was speechless. Jiang Shao suddenly opened his arms as if he was hugging the sun. All of a sudden, there were many space doors in front of him. That scene. He looked like a child standing in front of a television screen in a shopping mall. There were hundreds of television screens in front of him. Jiang Shao looked at second last in a daze and said, there seems to be no upper limit. Second last had a peculiar expression on her face as she looked up at the rows of space doors. However, she discovered that the space doors were very small and each one was at most 1m x 1m, which was even smaller than the entrance to the Dragon Cave. Second last said, as the number of space doors increases, the space doors get smaller and smaller. Jiang Shao shook his head and said, no, I deliberately adjusted the size of the space door so that the creatures inside would not escape. After saying that, Jiang Shao waved his hand on the left and deliberately opened a space door that had no creatures behind it. Under his control, the door expanded rapidly, and in just a few seconds, it reached a size of 20m*20m. However, it encountered some shackles and the vertically open space door suddenly stopped when it was about to touch the neatly arranged small space doors. It could no longer expand. It seemed that the space doors could not be intersected at any angle. Second last observed everything silently and said, I'll go take a look. Jiang Shao put away the huge space door beside him and watched as second last walked towards the rows of small space doors. Second last poked her head into the 5th space door in the 3rd row and saw a piece of Antarctica that was covered with glaciers. She retreated and took a few steps forward before poking her head into the 9th space door in the 4th row, only to see a scorching desert. After checking a few more space doors and confirming her thoughts, second last said, you mean, there are countless space doors that lead to your Calamity shadow space? Jiang Shao nodded and said, I don't feel the upper limit of the number of space doors. Second last sighed and said, tell me, is this the prototype of the Holy Ground? Jiang Zhao's face stiffened. Second last said, you told me before about the old man named Hopkins's conjecture about the alien ball. We're probably in the space of a certain star warrior, and you seem to be developing in that direction. Jiang Zhao's Adam's apple squirmed, and he had already thought of the possibility of such an operation. However, Jiang Zhao's space door was a two-way teleportation, while the Holy Ground in the lower and upper dimensions was one-way for most people. Strictly speaking, the Holy Ground was also two-way, but the space channel was very unstable and one could only go up. It was almost impossible to go down. Second last said, if the corners of the continents and oceans in your Calamity shadow world are filled with star beasts, you'll be able to create the effect of sending dimensional doors. Jiang Zhao's heart raced and he exclaimed, "No, that's not right." Second last asked, "Huh?" Jiang Zhao said, "I'm very sure that these densely packed space doors can only be opened by my hand." "I'll step back." While speaking, Jiang Zhao retreated. The star techniques of ordinary star warriors had to be activated at hand, because there were invisible threads of star power connecting them. Once they were too far away from the space door, the threads of star power would break and the space door would close on its own. However, Jiang Zhao had clearly walked further than the other star warriors. When he was about 20 meters away from the space door, the rows of television screens closed one after another according to the distance and disappeared without a trace. Jiang Zhao said, "In other words, I can't open space doors all over the world. I can only open them at hand." Jiang Zhao deliberately took a look at his internal star map to confirm that Jiao Yang was already of the highest quality. The information transmitted by the internal star map wouldn't be fake. His star techniques, Spacetime Rift and Calamity Shadow Ruin, were considered to have completely graduated and reached the peak. Jiang Zhao continued, "Besides, my space door is two-way and is far inferior to the holy ground. Besides, I don't have the ability to create the upper and lower dimensions." Second last nodded silently and said, "It's hard to say in the future." Second last's information was obviously not on the same level as his. She didn't know that Jiang Zhao had already reached the peak of his star technique. Jiang Zhao thought about it and said, "I don't think there's any possibility of further improvement in my star technique." Second last was non-committal and did not dwell on that issue. Instead, she asked, "Are there any other ways to use it?" Jiang Zhao carefully sensed it for a while, but he shook his head and said, "There seems to be none. By the way, let's go in and try to open the door." The two of them got to work immediately. Jiang Zhao left a space door behind and closed all the other space doors. He then continuously expanded the space door and said thoughtfully, "There's no limit to the number, but there's a limit to the size. It seems to be a 100m * 100m square." Second last said, "Okay." The two of them walked in and stood under the starry sky of a grassland, smelling the fragrance of the green grass and soil. Jiang Zhao suddenly opened his hands and looked like he was hugging the sun again. Whoosh! A lonely space door opened in front of Jiang Zhao. Jiang Zhao was speechless. Second last did not react at all and simply watched Jiang Zhao's performance quietly. However, Jiang Zhao didn't act this time. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't open a second space door. Jiang Zhao said, "In other words, there's no way to open an unlimited number of space doors in my Calamity Shadow World. You can only open one." Second last strode forward and looked at the space door. After observing for a moment, she retreated and said, "It's still the teaching block of the Northern Military Academy outside. The location of your space door is the place where you came in. It can't be changed." "Well, that should be the case." Jiang Zhao rubbed his chin and pondered for a long time. Outside the Calamity Shadow World, countless dimensional doors could be opened. Clearly, this new operating method, in his hands, what kind of new gameplay would it have? Moving? Species migration? Opening the space door in Beijiang could drive groups of white ghouls into the 4 Dragon Islands? All he had to do was open the 2 space doors parallel and close to each other. He could open one space door under the Great Meng Star and the other space door on the Eastern European chessboard. The more people there were, the higher the defense of the chessboard army, and the more powerful the Ghost Wolf clan. The more people there were, and the more powerful the output of the Ghost Wolf clan. Oh yes. Jiang Zhao's eyes lit up. Although the 2 damned hidden dragons were on the same island, one was on the east side of the island, while the other was on the west side. Didn't they always sleep in separate beds? Jiang Zhao could stand outside and open the 2 space doors to close the distance between the 2 dragons. For the sake of a couple who were in a cold war, the kind-hearted toxic healer was willing to open 2 space doors. I'll help you cross the mountains and cross the sea. Please cheer for love. You don't even have to step out of your house, and your partners will send you to each other's door. You still have the cheek to call yourselves dragons? I'm the dragon, right? This service. TSK. Jiang Shao was deeply touched by himself, and couldn't help but sigh softly. What a pure heart! What other reason do they have not to love each other? What other reason do they have not to make dragon babies? I'll continue to resist stubbornly and continue to add more points for the monthly vote. I tried my best. I'm working hard. I still have 20 points. Chapter 1192. Second last asked, are there any changes in the spacetime rift? Jiang Shao carefully looked at the introduction of the star technique, only to realize that there were no changes at all. It was still the same sentence. Ingeniously using the spacetime rift to make you a true fanatic. Consumes a lot of star power to teleport. Bullsh * T fanatic my foot. I can't even travel through dimensions. Just now, when Jiang Shao entered the space door that he opened, he couldn't teleport in at all. Jiang Shao hesitated for a moment and said, I don't know what's changed. Maybe the number of people I can bring has increased. I could only bring 9 people in the past, but there might be more now? Or maybe the distance of teleportation has increased? Can I teleport to the moon? Second last said, I'm experimenting with bringing more people. As for teleporting to the moon, we'll talk about it after you're able to endure it. At least return to Earth and put on a spacesuit before experimenting. Jiang Shao nodded and immediately brought second last to the Yi ancient pagoda in the Calamity World. Compared with the creatures in the Birch Forest and the Dancing Soul City, the ghost monks were a race that lived all day, slept very little, and were extremely energetic. When Jiang Shao arrived, he didn't greet them and simply teleported into the antique city, leaving with 6 or 7 ghost monks who were sizing up the weapons in front of the blacksmith shop. The ghost monks were dumbfounded. Jiang Shao dashed straight into the ancient pagoda. Most of the ghost monks would be willing to cultivate around the Pillar of Light when they weren't fighting. Although there were no practical effects, they liked it. It seemed to be because of their genes. Here, Jiang Shao teleported to Pagoda number 2 with dozens of ghost monks. To the ghost monk clan, it was a day of haunting. They wandered on the streets, cultivated in the pagoda, rested in the small courtyard, and fought in the arena. For some reason, hundreds of ghost monks were all teleported to the gate of the Yi ancient pagoda. Then there was nothing else. It was because the mischievous Jiang Shao ran away with second last after doing something naughty. The group of ghost monks stood guard in front of the Yi ancient pagoda for a long time, but they didn't see any enemies. Their heads were filled with bewilderment and they were all dumbfounded. Then they all went back to their own homes and found their own mothers. Jiang Shao realized that bringing along an additional creature was not as simple as having an additional portion of star power. Instead, it was increasing exponentially. Who could stand it? There was no limit to the quantity, but who would be able to withstand such a crazy increase in price? What about the second cup at half price? After experiencing it for a while, Jiang Shao returned to the stone villa with second last and ended the night of the experiment. Second last returned to the 3rd floor of the villa that belonged to her to rest, while Jiang Shao walked to Xia Yan's door and knocked on it gently. As expected, Xia Yan was still awake. She had changed her clothes, but it was not her pajamas. Instead, she was still wearing the black uniform of the Guardians of the Night. Clearly, she had been waiting for Jiang Shao. Starry sky, Xia Yan murmured excitedly. After Jiang Shao entered, she lay down on the bed, placed her hands in front of her chest, and closed her eyes with a look of anticipation. Jiang Shao scratched his head and looked around, only to realize that Xia Yan had made some arrangements. There were 15 to 16 sea soul lamps hanging here, illuminating the pitch-black room with a sea blue color. It was incomparably cozy. There were even 7 or 8 sea soul lamps placed around her bed in a circle, There's a smell. Is this some kind of evil ritual? Soul summoning? Jiang Shao carefully stepped over the sea soul lamps and sat beside Xia Yan's bed. What's your star power realm now? Xia Yan closed her eyes and said, I'm at the peak of Star Sea. I worked very hard when I was down there too. When I wasn't on a mission, I would sleep in my Calamity Shadow Space. However, my Calamity Shadow Space has now been upgraded to diamond quality. It's too big and the star power can't fill that space. But it doesn't matter, the star power concentration in the alien sphere is also very high. You've seen my recent efforts. All of a sudden, Jiang Shao felt that the person lying in front of him was like a little girl who was asking for praise. However, then again, who wouldn't want their efforts to be recognized? Jiang Shao said, Yeah, you've really worked hard. After the transformation, your star power realm will definitely be higher than mine. Upon hearing this, Xia Yan pursed her lips and said, Hey, don't hit me. I awakened 2 years earlier than you. Come on, let's not talk about this anymore. Jiang Shao smiled and said, Why are you lying on the bed? I'm the one who's sleeping, not you. Xia Yan widened her eyes. Jiang Shao said angrily, In a while, I'll use star transformation and fall asleep from exhaustion, but you'll be full of energy and vigor. Oh. Yes. Xia Yan hurriedly got up and walked to Jiang Zhao's side. She put one arm around Jiang Zhao's back and the other under his legs before carrying him to the bed and lying on the spot where she was previously. Jiang Shao was dumbfounded. Everything happened so quickly that Jiang Shao was dumbfounded. After doing all that, Xia Yan suddenly snapped back to reality and glared at Jiang Shao with a slightly flushed face. What are you looking at? Hurry up! Hurry up! Jiang Shao pursed his lips and pulled out a book from his chest. You're so impatient. When can you change your temper? Xia Yan was displeased as soon as she heard that. Advancing to the Starry Sky stage was an extravagant dream for most people. She was already patient enough to wait for such a long time. Xia Yan raised her eyebrows and summoned the soul of the Sea Devourer, which floated above Jiang Shao. She pointed at him and said, I've been waiting for you in the empty room all night. Do you know how anxious I was? You still have the cheek to say that? While flipping through the pages of the book, Jiang Shao said without looking up, Didn't I go to advance the star technique quality? Oh, by the way, how was it? What new functions will there be after the advancement of the star technique quality? Xia Yan asked frantically. Jiang Shao said, I'll reform you first. When you rest tomorrow, you can ask Jiang Gong or Martha. It's hard to explain in a few words. While speaking, Jiang Shao lay comfortably on the bed and shifted his gaze away from the book to look at Xia Yan, who was floating above him. He said, Fix your position and don't move. Don't move your limbs. Xia Yan nodded repeatedly and said, Hurry, tie me up. Jiang Shao froze for a moment, only to realize that Xia Yan did not speak to him. The loose clothes of the soul of the Sea Devourer that Xia Yan was wearing suddenly curled up and wrapped around her from head to toe, from her torso to her limbs, fixing her in midair. Jiang Shao grinned and said, After you advance to the Starry Sky stage, go out and test your body. Don't disturb my sleep. I got it. Why are you so dawdling? Xia Yan exclaimed in her native accent. Let's go. Jiang Shao didn't reply to her again. Instead, the thick Star Warrior era book in his hand emitted a dazzling ray of light, after which a human structure diagram floated out and slowly landed on Xia Yan's body. The strange human structure diagram and the lines of the human body were constantly adjusted, and finally, they were inlaid with Xia Yan's body. In Xia Yan's eyes, she saw a few special symbols that were exuding a mysterious aura. They slowly drifted towards her and began to revolve around her. At the next moment, Xia Yan felt a little dazed as a wave of star power flowed into her brain. It was a wonderful yet wonderful feeling that rippled in her mind and spread to her limbs. It was a kind of extreme enjoyment. It wouldn't make one feel dizzy, but it would make her feel extremely blissful. When one could clearly feel the continuous strengthening of one's physical fitness, the continuous expansion of one's star power storage, and the rapid rise of one's star power realm, for a star warrior, such a feeling might be the best enjoyment in the world. As Jiang Shao manipulated the star power to circulate in Xia Yan's body, she felt a wave of energy flowing in her meridians and transforming her body frantically wherever it passed. 1 round, 2 rounds, finally, Xia Yan's slightly dazed gaze saw the mysterious symbols surrounding her body shatter and fuse into her body. The room had lost its strange luster, and only the sea soul lamps were still emitting a gentle light. Below her, Jiang Shao, who was lying on the bed, had already fallen asleep. Xia Yan was overjoyed and couldn't help but stretch her limbs. However, she inadvertently caught sight of Jiang Zhao's exhausted face. He didn't sleep well, and it was a state of fainting due to exhaustion. He wasn't sleeping soundly, ha! Xia Yan sighed deeply and floated down carefully. After he fainted, there was no one to bicker with, so she didn't have any intention of fooling around. Xia Yan reached out and took off Jiang Zhao's military boot. After some thought, she decided to take off his military uniform, revealing his underwear. She carefully floated in the air, picked up a corner of the duvet, and covered Jiang Shao with it. Under the blue light, his face was illuminated, and Xia Yan's heart skipped a beat. "Thank you, Jiang Shao." She floated forward a little and muttered softly. All of a sudden, she lowered her head and kissed his cheek before disappearing in a flash below Xia Yan's room. In room number 2 and room number 3 on the first floor, Jiang Gong and Martha grinned at the same time and said the same thing. "How dare you sneak an attack on me?" They were indeed the same person. Their thoughts, reactions, and language were all exactly the same. All of a sudden, the two of them heard Gu Shi'an's voice coming from room 3 on the second floor. "Brother, do you think you've suffered a loss?" To be honest, the stone villa was huge and everyone's room was huge too. The soundproofing effect of the stone was also very good. However, the members of the tail feather team had gold quality perception at the very least, and some of them were even of diamond quality. The first floor, second floor, and third floor made no difference to people of their level. Ichingchen chuckled in room 1 on the first floor. "Hee, Pippi is probably snickering in his heart," second last said from the third floor. "Shut up and go to sleep." Jiang Gong sighed and thought, Jiang Latu's villa in the mirror is still the best. The air wall is indeed annoying, but it's soundproof. Ever since he gained perception, Jiang Gong had also experienced what second last felt. What did it mean to be observant and alert? She had heard some of the little tricks and mutterings that the newbie had with her previously, but she just didn't point it out. Marta sat up and pondered for a moment before disappearing in a flash. She arrived at the lake, only to see Xia Yan stepping on the surface of the lake and dancing under the night sky. The thick star power on the sword cut the surface of the lake, but there were no sounds of explosions at all. It seemed that she was experiencing the feeling of being in the starry sky stage. Marta stepped on the surface of the lake with her jade-like feet, causing ripples to form on the calm surface of the lake. She reached out and a sword made of water droplets slowly emerged from the lake and floated into her hand. "Want to try?" "You?" Xia Yan tilted her head and looked at Marta. "You're just a small fry in the early stages of the starry sky stage. How dare you challenge the great goddess Yan?" Marta was dumbfounded. Since when did the starry sky warriors become small fries? "Yes, I'm indeed a small fry in the tail feather brigade, but in the world, any country that has a starry sky warrior will be worshipped. Is China strong? In terms of star warriors, they're the best in the world. But look at He-Yun. Luckily, he has a bait to move around. His real body is still stuck in the office. He can't even step out of the door." Marta humphed coldly and said, "Ha, woman." Xia Yan asked, "You're not?" "Oh yeah, I'm really not," Xia Yan yelled awkwardly. "How dare you provoke me? I'll kill you with my sword." She then whipped out a sword of desperation. Marta looked at Xia Yan with a sullen gaze and sighed. I just helped you increase your star power realm, and you're turning against me now. A minute ago, you secretly kissed me and now, you're going to kill me. Xia Yan's eyes suddenly flickered and she squinted slightly. A hand that was surrounded by mist appeared on the surface of the lake where she was standing just now. Clearly, Xia Yan had already seen through the Sea Soul prison before it was fully formed. Xia Yan licked her lips and activated the Sword of Desperation. The rapidly descending figure stirred up gales of stellar energy, blowing away her maroon short hair, revealing her astonishingly charming face. With an indescribable sense of sexiness and wildness, she smashed down with a loud bang. Even though she knew that Martha was Jiang Shao, her attitude towards Martha was worlds apart from the way she treated Jiang Shao right from the beginning. Marta's pupils constricted and her body instantly shattered into water droplets that splashed into the lake. Boom! The tranquil surface of the lake suddenly exploded. At the end of the bridge, Mengpo, who was sitting on the ground with her back against the tree, was lowering her head and dozing off. She was still holding a bowl of Mengpo's soup in her hand. This loud noise startled her, and the half a bowl of thick soup in her hands spilled all over the floor. Chapter 1193. Ah! The next night, Jiang Shao opened his eyes in a daze and looked around in confusion. After a long while, he finally remembered where he was. It was Xia Yan's room, and there was a circle of sea soul lamps around it. Although he had slept for a day and a night, Jiang Shao still felt his head buzzing. Ah, it's so uncomfortable. I've had enough of the feeling of overusing star transformation. Jiang Shao grimaced in pain and covered his head with one hand. He shook his head vigorously and arrived at the lakeside forest in a flash. Under the moonlight it was so quiet. Jiang Shao squatted down and washed his hands, but he didn't know what to do. It was the middle of the night when he slept and it was still the same when he woke up. My teammates are resting, right? What should I do? Should I train my physical skills? Jiang Shao hesitated and did not wash his face to wake himself up. He felt that he was in a terrible state and his head was groggy. Should I continue to sleep until dawn? While thinking about it, Jiang Shao decided to be presumptuous and give himself another night of vacation. Forget it, I'll go back to sleep. I'll go back to Xia Yan's room and try not to disturb others. He thought about Xia Yan's soul-summoning ritual last night and felt annoyed and amused at the same time. His figure flashed again and returned to her room. Time and space gap, let's go whoosh. All of a sudden, Jiang Shao was stunned. In the room, there was a soft, dark blue light and there were sea soul lamps everywhere. However, the problem was that there was a person lying on the big bed that was supposed to be empty. He looked exhausted and was sleeping soundly on the big bed, not noticing Jiang Zhao's arrival at all. Jiang Shao was dumbfounded. Who is this? Where did this bait come from to snatch my bed? I just woke up and went out for tens of seconds and you're already snatching my bed? Jiang Shao was very sure that there was no one in the room when he woke up. Everyone knew the pain of overusing star transformation, so no one was willing to disturb his rest, let alone his bait. Wait a minute. Something's wrong. If Jiang Shao snatched his bed during the short time he went to the lake, he wouldn't have slept so soundly. Moreover, be it the mech or the decoy, they were the same person as Jiang Shao. There was no such thing as snatching the bed. Judging from the exhausted and lethargic look on the bed, it was clearly Jiang Shao, who had just transformed Xia Yan yesterday. Bang! There was a loud bang, and the sound of water splashing came from the lakeside. Xia Yan stabbed her sword towards Martha, who was stepping on the surface of the lake with a look of panic on her face. The battle in the lake was in full swing. In Xia Yan's room, Jiang Shao looked at himself who was sleeping soundly on the bed and felt his scalp turn numb. He seemed to have realized something terrifying. Gulp. Jiang Zhao's Adam's apple squirmed. His figure flashed and disappeared without a trace. Under the moonlight, at the edge of the forest lake, a figure flickered. Jiang Shao stood at the edge of the lake again. Without the battle between Xia Yan and Martha, it was still quiet. Everything that Jiang Shao had just experienced caused a huge stir in his heart. Did he just go back to a day ago? Did he return to the time when Xia Yan had just been transformed by Star Warriors and passed out? Damn it! Jiang Shao had goosebumps all over his body. Fortunately, he had a lot of baits. The people in the villa with strong senses might have thought that he was Jiang Shao. In order to make space for everyone, Jiang Shao had been sleeping in the wooden hut with the great sage, Fu Hei, Yingye and Ho Mingming in the forest by the lake. In order not to interfere with the other baits and mechs, Jiang Shao had cut off the connection between the baits and mechs when he transformed Xia Yan yesterday. Otherwise, Jiang Gong, who was sleeping on the first floor, would have been the first to realize that something was wrong. He should have thought that he was Jiang Shao just now. Jiang Shao stood by the lake and covered his buzzing head with one hand. What's going on? I just want to return to Xia Yan's room and continue sleeping. Why did I flash back to last night? Jiang Zhao's Adam's apple squirmed. This is the highest quality Jiao Yang space-time rift? This is the true unruly fanatic? Jiang Shao hurriedly opened the internal star map and looked at the introduction again. Jiao Yang space-time rift. The ingenious use of the space-time rift allows you to become a true unruly fanatic. Ugh! Jiang Shao mumbled in pain. He felt as if his head had been pricked by a needle, and the sudden pain made him feel extremely uncomfortable. A figure appeared at the window on the second floor. Han Jiangxue stood in front of the window and looked at Jiang Shao, who was by the lake in the distance. She couldn't help but feel her heart tighten. Has my brother woken up? But why does he look so miserable? Just when Han Jiangxue was about to comfort Jiang Shao, she discovered that he had disappeared again. Han Jiangxue closed her eyes and carefully sensed. She, who possessed the diamond, sea demon will star technique, soon found Jiang Shao, who was rummaging through Jiang Gong's room. Where is he going? Why did he change his clothes? Second last, who was living on the third floor, slowly opened her eyes too. She could sense that Jiang Shao had changed into a dusty t-shirt, sports coat, jeans, and a baseball cap. Then Jiang Shao disappeared. Jiao Yang, space-time riff. Let's go. Let's see how capable you are. It was a simple flash, but to Jiang Shao it was a spiritual journey. During the almost negligible flash, Jiang Shao saw a lot of memories and found a lot of images. Whoosh! Jiang Zhao's figure appeared in the stadium, which was filled with tens of thousands of people. There was a huge commotion. It was extremely noisy. Huaxia! 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 In the noisy arena, Jiang Zhao's figure appeared at the back of the spectator seats amidst the cheering and fiery red spectator seat. It was July 4, 2019, the battlefield of the World Cup. Facing the battle on the green field, everyone stood and watched while surging forward. Although the last few rows were crowded, there were still plenty of seats. Jiang Shao lowered his baseball cap and looked at the battlefield below. On the green field, the two of them fought fiercely like a horse lantern. Jiang Shao saw Hai Rigu, the great Ming dynasty's archer, who was riding a black horse and shooting arrows. He also saw himself, who was wearing a national team uniform and shooting arrows. Their horses were constantly spinning in circles, and the arrows they shot collided in the air. The scene was extremely intense. Bang! On the left, the host, Qian Baiwan, slammed his palm on the table and exclaimed excitedly, "Pure skills! The purest form of showmanship!" Yi Xuanyang's familiar figure appeared in front of Jiang Shao. She clenched her fists and said in a trembling voice, "Jiang Xiaopi has really given up on his advantage." The host, Qian Baiwan, was extremely agitated and yelled, "Drizzling rain, horse galloping in flames. Spear and halberd, bow and arrow." Holding a strong bow, holding a spear and halberd, and riding a fine horse for several years. Today, it's time to show it to others. Ha! Jiang Zhao's heart, which had been silent for a long time, gradually became restless. The spectator seats in front of him were all red. On the green field below, it was him who was once dressed in fresh clothes and galloping on a horse. Qian Baiwan's agitated and infectious voice was still ringing in his ears. "Who are you arrogant and domineering for?" Jiang Zhao lowered his head and lowered the brim of his hat slightly. Instead of continuing to watch, his figure flickered. After fighting in the alien ball for too long, he had already forgotten the wonderful feeling. Whoosh! Jiang Zhao once again appeared in the World Cup. This time, it was like the end of the world, and the sky was gloomy. In the torrential rain, a toxic healer was kiting the European shield at a close distance above the green field. It was July 11, 2017. Neon Yixuanyang was still seated in the host seat, but the male host beside her was Maku. Yixuanyang clasped her hands in front of her chest and looked at the arena worriedly, just like most of the Chinese spectators. Compared to the competition 2 years later, the arena was silent this time. In the air, the toxic healer who flung his giant sword away, flashed his elbow, and descended from the sky, aiming at Neil. The silent arena was filled with exclamations. "How are you going to beat me? How are you going to beat me?" Jiang Zhao muttered softly, and the toxic healer who descended from the sky on the green field mouthed the same thing. However, Jiang Zhao suddenly discovered that the toxic healer who descended from the sky suddenly turned his head to look at a corner of the stadium where tens of thousands of people were. He then looked in Jiang Zhao's direction. The green field was the Tears of Sorrow area. However, the entire city should be within the range of the Tears of Sorrow area. Jiang Zhao was shocked and thought, "I've been discovered? I'm extremely terrifying in 2017. At that time, all of my star techniques were not sealed. At that time, how would he react when he discovered another Jiang Zhao who had suddenly appeared and wasn't a bait for him?" In 2017, Jiang Zhao threw out a silence and a blessing. At this moment, Jiang Zhao was likely to lose his life there. Jiang Zhao's expression changed, and he subconsciously lowered the brim of his hat before hurriedly leaving. On May 13, 2016, Chang'an People's Stadium, China. Blue and white flower. Beat him to death. Kill him. Kill him. Teach this rascal a lesson. There was a burst of noise, but there were fewer cheers and more disapproval. Yixuanyang was still at the host seat, and she seemed to be defending the toxic healer. However, on the green field, the toxic healer yelled, "There are a total of 9 moves in the Xia family swordsmanship. Because I've mastered it thoroughly, I've already created the 10th move. Let's wait and see. Let me show you my skills and see if I'm qualified to fight you." While speaking, Jiang Zhao, who was hiding in the corner of the audience, couldn't help but cover his face. The 10th move of the Xia family swordsmanship, hidden dagger in a smile. At the next moment, the toxic healer on the green field picked up the giant sword, spun in circles, and laughed. "Ha ha 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 ha. Sword, ha 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 ha. Pft." The laughter of the girl who liked to laugh could be heard from above the iron cage. Jiang Zhao gently lowered the brim of his hat, smiled, and shook his head before flashing away. The competitions were all precious memories, but at this moment, they could be clearly displayed in front of Jiang Zhao. The top 8, top 16, and the team qualifiers. In the ancient imperial mausoleum in Chang'an, Jiang Zhao appeared there according to his memories and sighed deeply. It was the place where the team from Jiangbin High School had made it to the National League. It was also the place where the rules of the qualifiers were slightly dark. Jiang Zhao looked at the wall on the left and saw that there were all kinds of exquisite carvings of giants. He couldn't help but stretch out his fingers and gently press them on the stone carvings, his mind filled with memories. Fortunately, he had rushed out this time. Otherwise, everything that followed would not have existed without the champion of the National League, there would be no void calamity shadow star beads sent by Feng Yi, and second last might not have been transferred to the Northwest Guardians of the Night. As for Jiang Shao and Han Jiangxue, without the help of the spacetime rift and the calamity shadow ruins, it was very likely that their lives would have been lost in the sudden opening of the south gate of the school. Not to mention the 2 World Cups in the future, there would have been no exploration of the North Atlantic Ocean, no Conkind mission, no trip to the foreign planet, no battle on the peninsula. Jiang Shao. Jiang Zhao's fingers that were pressing on the wall stiffened slightly, and he turned his head abruptly, only to see a familiar yet unfamiliar figure in the dark corridor in the distance. It was familiar because he had memories of that person in his mind. This reticent stone carver had left a deep psychological trauma in Jiang Zhao's heart back then. It was no longer a matter of violating the rules and withdrawing from the competition, but Jiang Shao was a little worried that the cloaked man would slaughter the team from Jiangbin High School. The stone carver wearing a cloak stood in the dark stone corridor. He was strange and mysterious. He lowered his head slightly, revealing only half of his chin that was covered in stubble. His voice was slightly hoarse and full of vicissitude. Which year? Jiang Shao paused for a moment and did not respond. The cloaked stone carver slowly walked out of the dark corridor and asked in a deep voice again, "Which year are you from?" Jiang Shao was dumbfounded. Monthly votes. Chapter 1194. The cloaked stone carving master's voice was hoarse as he shouted, "I asked you which year you came from." Jiang Shao frowned slightly and his body tensed up. He was ready to fight. Seeing this scene, the cloaked stone carving master's slightly excited expression gradually calmed down. The short 5 seconds felt like an eternity to the oppressive atmosphere. Heh! The cloaked stone carving master sighed deeply and slowly took off his hood, revealing an old face that had been through the vicissitudes of life. Then, his face changed, and in the end it turned into Jiang Zhao's appearance. A mature Jiang Shao could also be called an old Jiang Shao. Jiang Zhao's pupils shrank slightly. His mind raced as he stared at the old Jiang Shao in front of him. He could be 40 years old or 50 years old. Jiang Shao suddenly found that he could not tell his specific age because his state was too special. His face that had been through the vicissitudes of life seemed to have gone through all the hardships of the world. Perhaps this should be the face of a 40-year-old, but it had a pair of cloudy eyes that had seen everything in the world. His state was not good, very bad. His face was pale, his stubble was loose, and his hair was messy. The stone carving master, old Jiang Shao, slowly opened his mouth. This time, he was calm. "What year are you from?" Jiang Shao thought for a while and replied, 2020. The stone carving master frowned slightly and nodded. He fell into deep thought. Jiang Shao lowered the brim of his hood and secretly looked around to ensure that it was safe. The stone carving master suddenly asked, "Before coming here, did you go to other places? Did you change history?" Jiang Shao was stunned and said, "No." "Good." The stone carving master let out a big sigh of relief. His nervous face relaxed slightly as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his heart. Jiang Shao said, "Which year are you from?" The stone carving master shook his head silently and put on his hood again. He said, "That is not important. No matter which year I come from, I am not someone from your time and space." Jiang Shao was confused. The stone carving master lowered his head and walked to the stone painting on the wall. He stretched out his finger and gently drew the lines of the beautiful stone painting. He said, "Do you know why I came to 2016 and why I came here?" Jiang Shao frowned and asked, "Why?" The stone carving master squatted down and sighed deeply. He looked at the stone painting and whispered, "Because I regret it. Because, when I found out that I could travel through time, I wanted to change the past. I wanted to change everything." Jiang Shao asked in confusion, "What do you want to change?" In Jiang Zhao's life, He still held a grudge against the 29 missing warriors of Magistrate Yin and the Yi family disciples. However, in 2016, the fledgling Jiang Shao had yet to encounter any major setbacks in his life. Was there anything he needed to change this year? The stone carver looked at the stone carvings in front of him and said softly, "Here, my team and I were tricked. In this qualifying round, because we violated the rules, we were kicked out." Jiang Shao opened his mouth slightly and thought, didn't this old Jiang Shao get a ticket to the National League? Will second last still be transferred to the Guardians of the Night in the Northwest? In that case, did he and Han Jiangxue of his generation end up at Star Warriors University? Would his path in life and everything he would experience in the future undergo a huge change? Wait, he should have the space-time rift too? Is that why he could return here? So, did he absorb the star technique of space-time rift by chance in another life path later on? I thought I could change everything, but the truth is the opposite. I can't change anything. The stone carving master sighed heavily and continued, I can't change anything. Jiang Shao took a step forward and leaned his shoulder against the stone carving. He then looked down at the hooded stone carving master and asked, "What did you change?" The stone carving master remained silent for a while. "I went back to the past to save Han Jiangshue's parents. I returned here to deal with those who plotted against me, take back the honor that should have belonged to me, and walk the path of life that should have belonged to me." Jiang Shao was dumbfounded. Does Hopkins not deserve a name? In another space-time, did Jiang Shao, the stone carver, not meet the old man? If Jiang Shao were to ask himself, he would probably go back and nip Hopkins in the bud. The stone carving master raised his head and looked at Jiang Shao solemnly. "But I can't change anything. Whenever I change history, I create a new parallel universe." His voice was hoarse as he said, "When I excitedly rescued the Han couple who were exploring the Dragon Cave and returned to my spacetime, I thought that everything would change. However, I realized that I was wrong. My spacetime did not change at all. Once there is a change in history, a new spacetime universe will branch out at that point in time. In the spacetime where I changed history, Han Qing and Jiang Hongye were still by Han Jiangshue's side. When I returned to my own spacetime, nothing changed and everything was the same as usual. Her parents still hadn't returned and there was no news of them. What I changed was the life of another Jiang Shao." Jiang Zhao's Adam's apple squirmed. What he meant was, going back to the past and changing history would be ineffective. The stone carving master lowered his head and smiled bitterly. "I didn't believe it, so I tried a few more times and the conclusion I got was the same. I created happiness for some people and made up for their regrets. However, at the same time, I also created parallel universes one after another, where those who shouldn't have existed had to experience another world catastrophe. For the sake of a few people, in order to make up for my regrets, I've created even more people who have to suffer. You are one of them." Jiang Shao was dumbfounded. The stone carving master stood up and looked at Jiang Shao with a serious expression. "Strictly speaking, your existence was also created by me. Previously, when I wanted to return to my spacetime, but my world, because I wantonly changed history again and again, it produced an irreversible collapse. I can't go back." Jiang Shao asked, "Huh?" The stone carving master said word by word, "I harmed everyone because of my ignorance and recklessness." Jiang Shao fell silent, not knowing how to respond. He never thought that going back to the past through the spacetime gap would have such a powerful negative effect. It could even cause spacetime to collapse. Was it because the stone carving master went back to the past again and again, making the so-called spacetime gap bigger? Did it make spacetime more unstable? The stone carving master said, "That's why I'm asking you, did you change history before coming here?" Jiang Shao shook his head and said with certainty, "No, I just watched a few games secretly." "Yes. The stone carving master nodded and sighed. You are my spiritual sustenance. You are the life I should have had after I changed the path of my life. While I'm here, I'll always pay attention to news about you and see what kind of path I should have taken. Jiang Shao pursed his lips and didn't speak. The stone carving master said, Tell me, in the future, did you win the national championship? Jiang Shao nodded gently and said, Yes, I've won the World Cup. I've won both the individual and team competitions. I joined the Guardian of the Night and the Wasteland Reclaimers. Now we are experiencing the fusion of the Earth and the alien sphere. Hearing this, the stone carving master suddenly smiled. His weathered face was originally full of suffering, but at this moment it was like a flower blooming, and his eyes seemed to be a little red. Jiang Shao never thought that this smile would be so sweet. Well, let me give you some advice, Jiang Shao. The stone carving master lowered his head, wiped his red eyes, and pressed one hand on Jiang Zhao's shoulder. He stared at Jiang Shao solemnly with a face full of vicissitudes and a pair of turbid eyes. He slowly said, Don't try to change the past. You may make up for the regrets in your heart, but it will be for the benefit of others. Moreover, you will also create a new spacetime. You will create millions of people who are about to suffer, who are waiting to experience the catastrophe. Jiang Shao was a little overwhelmed, so he could only nod gently. What he meant was, changing the past could only create a branch of spacetime and create another parallel universe, but it couldn't really affect the original spacetime. The stone carving master said, There is no medicine for regret in this world. My spacetime has collapsed because of my many times traveling and tampering with history. Time is a line that never stops and moves forward, but I have created branches and gaps at the points of this line. In the end, the fragile time has broken. The gap of time and space will harm others and yourself. Forget this effect of the gap of time and space. After you go back, you can only use it to travel through space. Never try to travel through time again. Don't go back to the past, and don't change history. Spacetime is fragile, far more fragile than we think. You will destroy everyone. If you believe in yourself, then you should believe in me. Believe in the advice of the other Jiang Shao. Jiang Shao pursed his lips and asked, You said you can't go back, but are you going to stay here forever? Stay in this dark ancient imperial mausoleum? The stone carving master looked a little lonely and said, At this time, when you came here, I have already done everything I should do. But this is also my last time traveling. I can't leave. My space-time has been broken, and I am imprisoned here forever. Jiang Zhao's heart tightened and he asked, Imprisoned? Someone imprisoned you? The stone carving master grinned and said, Maybe it's a person, maybe it's the laws, or maybe it's an ancient star warrior with scorched skin. Who knows? Jiang Shao froze for a moment and thought, What? What is he talking about? The stone carving master raised his head and looked at the gloomy environment. He looked at the long corridor full of stone carvings and said, To others this is just an ordinary lower dimensional space, but to me this is a cage. There are air walls everywhere. Jiang Shao asked, Air walls? The stone carving master said, My space star technique has failed here. I can't cross dimensions and I can't get out of here. There's a space gate in front of me, but I can't step out. Jiang Zhao's heart tightened, but he heard the stone carving master muttering to himself, You don't want to be like me, do you? You don't want to be imprisoned in a place full of air walls. You don't want to be trapped here, disguising your face, struggling to survive, and living in constant fear. At this point, the stone carving master suddenly smiled and said, But here, I can get news about you and about me. I believe everything you've told me, and I'll be waiting here. Or, you can go to the ancient imperial mausoleum in 2020. By then, I might have more to talk to you about. While speaking, the stone carving master seemed to have heard something. He immediately changed his appearance, pulled down his hood, and hid Jiang Shao behind him with one hand. He then propped up the large cloak and turned to look outside. In the distance, a group of high school students ran past the exit of the corridor. Jiang Xiao seemed to have vaguely seen a tall and familiar figure, which should be Ying Shi, a Rules Awakened from the Capital 32 High School. The group of high school students disappeared at the intersection in the distance. The stone carving master took a deep breath and said, "Go back. Don't stay in this space-time that doesn't belong to you for too long." Jiang Xiao said, "You," the stone carving master waved his hand and said, "Give me a promise. Don't try to fool with time. Don't go back to the past and don't go to the future. No matter what regrets you have, no matter what you experience, you can only move forward step by step. According to your timeline, you have to fight and create a future." Jiang Xiao said, "Okay." The stone carving master turned his head and looked at Jiang Xiao. "I am you, so I know what I believe in. I want a promise from you." Jiang Xiao nodded heavily. "I promise you." The stone carving master smiled. From Jiang Xiao's words, he could tell that Jiang Xiao didn't have any regrets that he couldn't let go of before 2020. At least, in his world, his comrades weren't dead. Go now." The stone carving master picked up the stone chisel, faced the wall, and gently knocked on it. Jiang Xiao lowered his cap and his body tensed up slightly. He was about to flash away, but he stopped. Looking at the lonely stone carving master in front of him, looking at the person who was imprisoned here forever, Jiang Xiao wanted to say goodbye to him, but he didn't know what to say. This seemed a bit too cruel. If I study the Star Warriors era and thoroughly study the rules of this world, can I release him from the cage? Ding! There was a crisp sound. The stone carving master felt that Jiang Xiao hadn't left, and he also felt Jiang Xiao's faint gaze, so he couldn't help but stop. He put down the small stone chisel and silently lowered his head. His smile was a bit bitter. "Go. I brought this upon myself." Jiang Xiao sighed in his heart. His figure flashed and disappeared. In his ears, the stone carving master's last murmur lingered. "You fool with time, and time will also fool you." In summary, this month, including this chapter, a total of 300,000 words have been updated. It is indeed more than 10,000 daily updates. I hope everyone is satisfied. Ability is one thing, attitude is another. In any case, Yu Zhen has tried his best. How should I put it? I hope this strange world is worth fighting for, and I hope everyone can accompany the little poisonous healer to the end. There is still a chapter at 12 p.m. Please give everyone a guaranteed monthly ticket. See you later. Chapter 1195. I'll add more chapters for Alliance Master Love. In the forest by the lake in the stone villa, Jiang Xiao, who had returned to the present, stood silently by the lake and looked at the calm lake water. He couldn't help but sigh deeply. Under the moonlight, it was so quiet that there was no sound at all. Usually, Jiang Xiao would have summoned the humming whale and the poo-poo whale to play, but at this moment, he wasn't in the mood to do so. After a long time, Jiang Xiao squatted down, picked up a stone, and threw it into the lake. Dong, in his mind, he was still trapped in the air wall. Jiang Xiao understood himself, so Jiang Xiao understood the other party too. Jiang Xiao thought of himself as someone who refused to admit defeat. Since he had such an ability, he would definitely make up for the regrets in his heart. The stone carver didn't say that he would rescue the 29 heroic souls who had gone missing in the infernal court, so the path of his life had probably been changed. Perhaps he didn't go to the Capital Star Warrior Academy, so he didn't have this experience. Jiang Xiao participated in the World Cup for the first time precisely because of the incident in the infernal court. Perhaps the stone carver didn't even participate in the World Cup twice. Did he meet Yi Qingchen? Did the disciples of the Yi family also escape the massacre of the Star Conversion Organization because he wasn't around? What is the life of the stone carver like? Does he have someone who stays by his side and never forsakes him? In his world, where did Han Jiangshi go? Oh, right. His world was overwhelmed by his space-time travel and eventually collapsed. Since he couldn't go back, he probably lost Han Jiangshi. At the thought of this, Jiang Shao pressed his hand against the ground and slowly lowered his head. What's wrong with you? A voice suddenly sounded beside him, accompanied by the spreading dark space teleportation shield. Jiang Shao heard the voice that he was probably hoping to hear the most at this moment. When she was alone with Jiang Shao, her voice was no longer cold, but rather filled with concern. Jiang Shao looked up and saw the beautiful figure beside him. The moonlight illuminated Han Jiangshue's alluring face and also gave her a clear outline of her body, a clear glow. What happened? Han Jiangshue squatted down and pressed her hand on Jiang Zhao's back. She tilted her head slightly and looked at Jiang Zhao's face. Did you go to Hopkins? No. Jiang Shao shook his head. I won't go to him. I don't have any bargaining chips, nor do I have the qualifications. Han Jiangshue nodded softly and said, You're not someone who cares about physical pain and fatigue, so what happened? Jiang Shao pursed his lips and remained silent. Han Jiangshue moved her palm forward and pressed it gently on Jiang Zhao's head. Don't you want to say it? Jiang Shao grinned. There's nothing I can't say. Han Jiangshue asked, Huh? Looking at the curious look on her face, Jiang Shao thought about it for a while and decided to teleport to the island where Hai Tianqing's family used to live. The sea breeze blew, bringing with it a salty scent. Jiang Shao sat down on the beach and said, I've met my future self. Hearing this, Han Jiangshue couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Jiang Shao reached out and patted the beach beside him. Without hesitation, Han Jiangshue sat beside Jiang Shao and looked at the sea that was shrouded in the night sky. How is your future self? Jiang Shao shook his head and said, To be exact, it's in another spacetime. The future me is completely different from my life. Han Jiangshue frowned slightly, seemingly digesting the information that Jiang Shao sent her. Jiang Shao said, My spacetime rift has already reached the highest quality. It gives me the ability to travel through time and space. Of course, I can only go back to the past and not the future. Han Jiangshue asked, Go back to the past? Jiang Shao nodded and said, Yes, go back to the past. As long as there are images in my mind, I can go back. However, I don't have any images in the future, so I can't travel through it with my imagination. So, I can only go back to the past. Han Jiangshue looked at Jiang Shao, who was wearing a cap, jeans, and the jacket in his hand. You can go back now. Jiang Shao said quietly, I'm going back. My star's conversion, 9 astral eyes can allow me to go back in time and see what happened in the past. It's at most a year, and I can't see any more than that. However, this Jiaoyang spacetime rift can allow my body to really go back to the past. Jiaoyang. Han Jiangshue muttered those 2 words, seemingly thinking of a blazing and radiant sun. Unfortunately, it was Jiaoyang, not Jiaoyang. Jiang Shao said, This was originally a journey of memories and also an experiment to see what my abilities are. However, I didn't expect to meet him. Han Jiangshue asked, Who? Jiang Shao said, Jiang Shao. Han Jiangshue said, Jiang Shao said, I originally planned to go back to look for your parents after this experiment, or go to the south gate of the capital to help the wasteland reclaimers and return to the Yi family to save the disciples. However, he told me that I can't do it. The spacetime rift is more like a trap and a joke. Han Jiangshue was smart and asked softly, Is there a price to pay? Jiang Shao turned around and looked at Han Jiangshue in bewilderment. Han Jiangshue looked at the dark sea and muttered softly amidst the undulating waves, Time travel. Such a star technique sounds too terrifying. It's so terrifying that I might have to pay a price for it. Jiang Shao pursed his lips, for he never thought that she would be able to see it so clearly as a bystander. Jiang Shao casually tossed his coat aside and leaned back slightly. He supported himself with his hands on the beach and looked at the boundless sea in front of him. Here's the thing. Han Jiangshu asked, what's the price? Jiang Shao pondered for a while and said, because he traveled through time and space multiple times and tampered with history, the original spacetime became chaotic and collapsed. He also stayed here with us and got trapped in a special environment. No matter how strong he is, he won't be able to get out of that cage. Han Jiangshu said softly, I won't let you do that, Jiang Shao. Jiang Shao asked, what? Han Jiangshu said, don't be sad because I can't find my parents. I cherish my days now and the people around me. Jiang Shao said, okay, in fact, even if I don't listen to your advice and save your parents, the ones I save will be the parents of another Han Jiangshu. It won't have anything to do with you. Besides, there will also be countless people waiting for the calamity to descend on another branch of time. Jiang Shao looked at Han Jiangshu quietly under the moonlight while the sea breeze blew her long hair, revealing the side of her face. Jiang Shao once wondered, since the spacetime rift can't be used, what's the point of giving such a star technique effect? Is it just to fool humans? At this moment, Jiang Shao finally understood. The significance of the star technique to him was probably because of what Han Jiangshu said just now. To Han Jiangshu, her parents were a thorn in her side of her star warrior career and even her entire life. She tried her best to improve her strength, enter the vigil of the night, enter the light-chasing team, and head to the dragon cave, all for the sake of stepping on the path that her parents had once taken and finding traces of them. If there was an opportunity in front of her, she would be able to find her parents. How would she feel? For many years, no matter how hard she worked, her unreachable dream could be realized in an instant. How would ordinary people react? However, Han Jiangshu was extremely calm. Facing Jiang Shao, she said, I cherish the days and the people around me very much. If he were to put himself in her shoes, Jiang Shao felt that he probably wouldn't be able to do it. Don't talk about such a topic again. Don't mention it to anyone. Han Jiangshu curled her legs and wrapped her arms around her knees. Her gaze was a little unfocused as she asked softly, is there another me by his side? Jiang Shao opened his mouth, but he couldn't say anything for a long time. Han Jiangshu did not turn around, but she could sense Jiang Zhao's reaction. The answer was self-evident. Indeed, the stone carver had nothing. He was in prison and had to endure the rest of his life alone. Jiang Zhao's existence was the only spiritual sustenance of the stone carving masters. At least, the stone carving masters in 2016 and at the time when Jiang Shao returned were still waiting for the news of Jiang Shao winning the championship. They were waiting for the news of another Jiang Shao getting on the right track. At the thought of this, Jiang Shao had an ominous premonition. At this moment it was already 2020. At this moment, the stone carver in the ancient imperial mausoleum on Earth should have already found out that Jiang Shao had won the national championship and even won the World Cup twice. He should also know that Jiang Shao had joined the Tail Feather Brigade and had fought all over the years. So, is the stone carver still alive at this moment? When he sees that everything is on the right track, is he still willing to endure the ravages of time alone in that prison? Has he already passed away? Or the other party was still waiting for Jiang Shao to return from the variant ball, waiting to witness the true ending of this catastrophe? Jiang Shao thought to himself. While he was in a trance, he felt an arm on his shoulder. He turned around, only to see that Han Jiangshu had extended her arm and wrapped it around Jiang Zhao's shoulder. She exerted some force and pulled him into her arms. At the next moment, she lowered her head and pressed her lips gently against Jiang Zhao's hair. Promise me that you'll never leave me. Jiang Shao said, Okay. Han Jiangshu said, I want your promise. Hearing this, Jiang Shao smiled and said, You know, just now, He also asked me to promise him that I'll never go back to the past or tamper with history. Hearing this, Han Jiangxue relaxed a lot and said softly, because those who know you well know what you believe in. So? Jiang Shao said, I promise you. Han Jiangxue finally smiled and slowly straightened her legs. Jiang Shao also laid down sideways and rested his head on her thighs. The night on Tree Island was not cold, and the sea breeze was even a little refreshing. Jiang Shao said softly, I'm a little frustrated. Let's go kill Hua Xing tomorrow to relieve our frustrations. Han Jiangxue smiled and placed her fingers on Jiang Zhao's head, gently stroking his short hair. You sound like a villain. I am the great demon king under the night sky on the island. The sound of the waves rising and falling, accompanied by the rustling sound of the wind blowing through the forest, made the environment seem even more tranquil. On the beach, the two of them chatted softly, and all their troubles seemed to have been drowned in the vast night sky. It was a new month and a new journey. Continue to work hard. Everyone, please give the Little Toxic Healer monthly votes. Chapter 1196. The two of them chatted on the beach for a long time, enjoying a rare moment of contentment. Late at night, Jiang Shao said, I'll send you back. You can still sleep for a few hours. I'll go out for a while. Han Jiangxue's heart tightened and she pressed his head against her thigh. Huh? Where are you going? Jiang Shao tried his best to pry her fingers away and said, It's midnight here, but it's noon in the United States. I'm going to send some star beads to my star advent team. If we're going to fight the star conversion team, the stronger the better. Han Jiangxue frowned slightly and asked, Is it? 3 Tails? Yeah, she's not called 3 Last anymore. Her code name is Blind Lady, Jiang Shao said softly. Han Jiangxue asked, Is she in America now? Jiang Shao replied, Yes, I'm currently in Thriller Paradise in Florida with my 2 mechas, carrying out missions and experimenting with star techniques. Han Jiangxue said, I'll go with you. Well, that's fine too. Jiang Shao finally freed himself from Han Jiangxue's grasp, sat up, and scratched his head. By the way, she's not easy to get along with. I only managed to get her to open up to me after years of hard work. As Jiang Shao spoke, he felt that something was amiss. Words, good words, but it didn't sound good to say it out loud. Han Jiangxue stared at Jiang Shao and said, I'd also like to see what the person second last has always been prejudiced against me looks like. Indeed, second last had been treating Han Jiangxue badly for a long time. It wasn't that she was bullying Han Jiangxue, but rather that she had never been nice to her. Han Jiangxue was innocent and second last couldn't get over it either. The only cause of this problem was the blind lady. Now, second last was already treating Han Jiangxue well, and was considered friendly. In fact, she would even indulge Han Jiangxue a little for the sake of Jiang Shao. Back then, Han Jiangxue questioned second last in front of everyone after she made the decision to stay in Dajiang and not go to the foreign planet to provide support. At that time, Han Jiangxue was probably the only one in the entire Tail Feather Brigade who dared to speak to second last like that. On the other hand, Han Jiangxue was punished to stand at the door for 8 hours, but she didn't make her stand the entire time. Instead, she merely punished her symbolically for a while before letting her go back to rest. That was enough to tell that second last had already put aside her prejudice against Han Jiangxue after being her subordinate for a long time. She had also helped Han Jiangxue get rid of her shadow. Jiang Shao grinned and said cautiously, She's a star and stage mage god, and she's also a control type. If she glares at us, we'll both die in her hands. Don't be rash. To her surprise, Han Jiangxue was much happier after hearing about the blind lady's abilities. She looked at Jiang Shao with a hint of awe in her eyes and said, You're the only one who can subdue such a subordinate. Subdue. The corners of Jiang Zhao's lips twitched. This term is interesting, huh? Why don't we change it to tame? Ah, so comfortable, Jiang Shao thought happily and laughed. Let's go, I'll show you. It took me a few years to tame this big sister. Han Jiangxue was speechless. Jiang Shao and Han Jiangxue flashed and found Jiang Latu before heading to Florida in North America together. It was worth mentioning that Jiang Latu's extremely luxurious villa did not change much, but the star beads had all been moved into the basement of the stone villa in the Calamity World by Jiang Shao and the others. At this moment, Jiang Latu's villa in the mirror was a leisurely and comfortable place to rest. People with artistic talent would probably like it there. Speaking of which, is Miss Blind Lady interested in oil paintings and antiques? I wonder if she has the attributes of a literary and artistic young woman in her body. In this regard, Jiang Shao was skeptical. It seemed that it would be difficult for a hard-working star warrior to dabble in other hobbies. After all, training was the main rhythm of life for such people, not to mention that she used to be a soldier. While thinking about it, Jiang Shao, Han Jiangxue, and Jiang Latu had already arrived at an amusement park. It was a real amusement park, and it was not a building from Earth that had been teleported here due to the fusion of Earth and the alien sphere. This area appeared in the form of an amusement park. Just like China's ancient imperial mausoleum and Yigu Pagoda, this thriller paradise was very much like human society. Stepping on the colorful stone bricks, Han Jiangxue was amazed, and she heard music that sounded like a music box. She looked around and saw a woman dressed in a long white robe and wearing a circle-shaped mask sitting elegantly on a bench. To Han Jiangxue's surprise, the first thing she saw when she saw Blind Lady was her hair. So long, so black, so soft, this hair. Did she just take a bath? However, Han Jiangxue did not know that Blind Lady had an easier time taking a bath than others. She just had to apply ink all over her body and let the ink fade. Because of her unique ability, Jiang Kelly and the other two could be said to be glamorous. On the bench beside the Blind Lady was a man with a mask on his face. He was wearing a black cloak and a hoop mask, but he had a top hat on his head. He was a little mysterious, but there was also a hint of gentlemanly aura. Following the sound of the music box, Han Jiangxue turned around and saw a beautiful and adorable woman sitting on a merry-go-round not too far away. Wow! Jiang Kelly grabbed the wooden handle of the merry-go-round with one hand and leaned back. As the merry-go-round moved, Jiang Kelly looked back and saw Han Jiangxue in the upside-down world. She smiled and said, "Are you here to play?" Han Jiangxue was speechless. She turned to look at Jiang Shao, who smiled and scratched his head. Finding joy in adversity. If you want to play, go ahead. That's my mecha too, Jiang Kelly. Han Jiangxue's small head was filled with doubts. This merry-go-round. How does it work? Is there electricity here? There should be, right? Han Jiangxue looked into the distance and saw that there were all kinds of facilities in the huge amusement park. Although the other places were quiet, it was brightly lit. The area where everyone was located was surrounded by music and colorful lights, just like a functioning amusement park. Jiang Shao could tell that she was bewildered and said, "This scene is really special. It's driven by strange energy. As long as a star warrior uses a little star power to guide the energy, the facilities will be activated." Han Jiangxue asked, "Energy?" Jiang Shao nodded and said, "Yes, the top of the ancient tower in Zhongyuan, China. Do you still remember the strange pillars of light in the tower?" Han Jiangxue said, "Of course." Jiang Shao shrugged and said, "There are some here too, but they're not in the form of pillars of light. They're more like water stains that spread out. You can't see them now because they're hidden under various facilities. There's a creature called the Dream-Building Clown here. It's humanoid and has only one star technique, which is to transform into various parts of entertainment facilities. With these materials, they'll build all kinds of entertainment facilities here and eventually build this place into a gorgeous amusement park." Han Jiangxue smiled and asked, "Summon construction materials?" Jiang Shao shrugged and said, Strictly speaking, those construction materials are made up of star power. If we summon them in other places, they will only shatter into a pile of star power. Hence, this star technique must be cast in this area and supported in a place where there's a strange energy emerging from the ground. Otherwise, it won't shatter. This time, I'm going to catch a few dream-building clowns and let them create an amusement park in the carnival area of Calamity World, Florida. In the future, I can bring Teacher Yuan and Teacher Fang's children here to play. Good idea, Han Jiangxue said softly and turned to look at the side of Jiang Zhao's face. Perhaps it's because you're so gentle that you can open blind girl's heart? Han Jiangxue thought to herself, but she didn't say it out loud. She knew that blind girl's perception should be very strong, especially for a blind person. Blind girl was more focused on hearing and had trained her hearing. Jiang Zhao strode forward with Han Jiangxue, and blind girl stood up from the bench too. When they arrived at the bench, Baze was still seated on the bench, but he suddenly extended his hand and handed it to Han Jiangxue with a red balloon. Han Jiangxue glanced at Jiang Zhao in amusement, pinched the white thread, and pulled the balloon over. This is my sister, Han Jiangxue. She's Han Jiangxue with 8 tails, Jiang Zhao said. Blind girl looked at Han Jiangxue and slowly extended her hand. Star Advent. Blind girl. Hello. Han Jiangxue handed the balloon to her left hand and extended her right hand to hold blind girl's soft palm gently. Blind girl quickly released her hand and tilted her head towards the green area behind her. Over there, I've imprisoned 6 dream-building clowns for you. Go ahead. Okay. Jiang Zhao scurried over. Han Jiangxue raised her head curiously and looked at the red balloon floating beside her head. The red balloon suddenly burst open and a layer of mist spread out, covering Han Jiangxue's face. The thin mist drifted around the tip of Han Jiangxue's nose and made her feel numb. It was a very slight numbness. She could tell that Baze had adjusted the effect of the star technique to the minimum. Han Jiangxue's body stiffened, but she quickly recovered and looked at Baze, who was wearing a top hat and a hoop mask, on the bench in front of her. Han Jiangxue kicked his calf in displeasure. She asked, "Why are you and blind girl both wearing masks, but Jiang Kelly isn't?" Baze's muffled voice sounded from behind the mask. "I just made a bet with a clown in a tuxedo, and lost my mask to him." Han Jiangxue was dumbfounded. As he spoke, Baze summoned another balloon. This time it was black. He said, "The color of the balloon, as well as the effects it contains, can be freely chosen. However, I only have the paralysis balloon, so there's only one effect. The clown in a tuxedo has 2 star techniques, the deceleration balloon and the purification balloon, so there are 2 effects. If Jiang Kelly guesses wrongly, the hoop mask will lose." Han Jiangxue was speechless. Baze pinched the edge of the top hat with one hand and raised it slightly to gesture at Han Jiangxue. "I won this hat from the pumpkin clown. This group of creatures are all of the diamond quality. Their IQ is very high, so high that it's a little scary." While speaking, Han Jiangxue frowned slightly and turned to look behind her. In the distance, there was a figure moving behind the street lamp on the left side of the street. Baze raised his hand and the layers of star power in his hand gathered together to form an exquisite revolver. He then aimed it at the street lamp and fired a shot. Bang! "Go away. I don't have time to play with you. Hoo hoo hee hee ha 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 ha." A series of creepy laughter came from behind the street lamp, and the clown in the hoop mask quickly scurried into the green plants on the side of the road. With a peculiar expression, Han Jiangxue turned to look at Baze. "He's probably addicted to winning. We've already let him go, yet he still dares to come back." Baze shrugged his shoulders, his expression exactly the same as Jiang Zhao's. He turned the revolver in his hand and continued, "Before coming to Florida, our team went to some places and stayed in Kansas for a few days. There were some cowboys there who went around looking for people to fight. The loser would have to leave behind the star beads in his head. This mithril revolver star bead comes from the star bead of the quick gunner. As he spoke, Baze took the exquisite revolver and aimed it at the sky. There was a flash of star power in the muzzle of the revolver, which seemed to be accumulating power. Bang! A star power bullet was shot out and shattered in the air. At the next moment, star power bullets rained down on the green area where the clown disappeared. For a moment the dense green plant area swayed. The mischievous creature also quickly ran far away. Huff! Baze blew at the muzzle, but due to the fact that he was wearing a hoop mask, the effect was not ideal. The exquisite revolver in his hand also shattered into bits of star power and disappeared without a trace. Not far away, in the green area, Jiang Shao looked at the few dream-building clowns with black flowers blooming on their chests. He walked towards them and looked at their clothes that resembled the clowns in poker cards, as well as the strange makeup on their faces. Jiang Shao couldn't help but grin and open the door of the Calamity World, which led to a carnival area in Florida. He kicked the humanoid clowns that were about 2 meters tall into the ground. A puddle of ink appeared on the ground behind him. The blind lady stood up shakily and asked, "Who's that old man?" Jiang Shao said, "He's one of the members of Star Conversion, just like Baze. He's my mecha now." The blind lady said in a muffled voice, "Has Tail Feather and Star Conversion started fighting?" Jiang Shao kicked the last dream-building clown in and closed the door. He then turned to look at the blind lady and asked, "Is Star Advent going to participate in the battle too?" The blind lady said without hesitation, "Sure." Jiang Shao thought about it and said, "You'll be facing second last then. Get ready." Hearing this, the blind lady's body stiffened. Jiang Latu appeared beside Jiang Shao quietly and opened the space door. He then took out the treasure chest that he had prepared and handed it to the blind lady. Jiang Shao said, "This is the underwater star technique you want." The blind lady remained silent for a while before slowly reaching out and grabbing the heavy treasure chest. Chapter 1197. The next day, in the morning, the dining room of the stone villa was bustling with noise and excitement. Everyone was eating various fruits, wild vegetables, and beef while discussing the mission that they were about to perform today. After serving the members of the Tail Feather team, Jiang Shou was still cooking. Jiang Latu, who was beside Jiang Shou, was opening the portal of the villa in the mirror and continuously delivering breakfast. Jiang Shao sat at the table and chowed down on the food while saying, "According to the location of the 9-star eyes, she should be on Sulan Island in the kingdom of the unsetting sun." Second last took a bite of the flour pancake in her hand, but her gaze was fixed on Jiang Shou and Jiang Latu, who were busy cooking in the open kitchen. Jiang Shao followed her gaze and looked over, but he did not explain anything. That was out of second last's expectations. Usually, Jiang Shao would be able to understand her every glance and action, which also made him feel comfortable getting along with her. She wasn't a talkative person, and Jiang Zhao's feedback on her actions made her very satisfied. However, this time, he didn't explain anything. Second last tossed the remaining half of the flour pancake into her mouth and twisted the crumbs on her fingers. She then looked at Jiang Shao and asked, "Who's in there?" Jiang Shao continued to eat the meat without responding. In fact, he had been thinking about it for a long time, but he didn't know how to communicate with second last. Second last looked at Jiang Shao silently and remained motionless. The slightly noisy dining table gradually quietened down too. Jiang Shao felt his scalp tingle and he decided to attack like a jerk. He didn't respond and only asked a question. He avoided the important and focused on the trivial to divert the conflict. Jiang Shao raised his head and wiped his mouth before saying, "You're so smart. Judging from my reaction, you should already know." Second last asked, "Where did you go last night?" Jiang Shao took a deep breath and said, "You're so smart, you should already know." Second last suddenly reached out and grabbed Jiang Zhao's collar before pulling him towards her. "Hey, let's talk nicely. Don't be impulsive. Jiang Shao grabbed second last's fingers with one hand and muttered, I just fed you. You picked up your bowl to eat and put down your chopsticks, and you don't recognize me anymore? Ah, it hurts. Jiang Shao struggled for a long time, but he could not pry her fingers off his collar. Feeling helpless, he scratched his head awkwardly and said, This time, we're probably going to Planet Washing's lair, so? I called a few reinforcements, my other teammates. The members of the Tail Feather Squad didn't know what was going on. When they saw Luan LV and Jiang LV's expressions, they couldn't help but fall silent and eat their melons. She's back too, second last said in a hoarse voice. Jiang Shao nodded gently and said, Don't be rash. You can't beat her. Second last was dumbfounded. Jiang Shao stammered and continued awkwardly, I mean, she's very strong and can be of great help to us. You know, she's a control type and will be very useful to us. Jiang Shao then clenched his fists and said, Let's put the past aside for now. Forget it, let's settle it alone. The conflict between second last and third last had existed for a long time, and it was not something that could be resolved overnight. Jiang Shao just hoped that second last could temporarily let go of some things and seek common ground while reserving differences. He wanted to pass the threshold of planet washing first. Of course, before carrying out the planet washing mission, he should make it clear to the two old Tail Feather Squad members that the mission this time was not for fun, but for life and death. Jiang Shao then disappeared with second last in a flash. Second last immediately changed from sitting to standing, but she did not let go of Jiang Zhao's hand. She looked around and found herself in a pitch-black dungeon. Not far away, there was a mortar prison ghost with black mist lingering around him. He was sitting in front of a stone pillar and dozing off. Hey, let go of me. Jiang Shao patted her palm gently. After spending time with Jiang Shao in private, second last's mentality changed greatly. She slowly let go of his hand, but she did not leave. Instead, she remained expressionless and hid all the emotions in her heart. At the next moment, Jiang Latu also flashed into the dungeon and opened the portal of the villa in the mirror. Second last stared at the portal silently for a long time, but she did not see anyone coming out. In the gallery of the villa in the mirror, the blind lady stood with her hands behind her back. Behind the hoop mask, her pitch-black eyes flickered slightly as she stared at the oil painting on the wall, seemingly a little uneasy. At the back, Baze crossed his arms in front of his chest and leaned against the wall. He said, We'll have to meet eventually. We're fighting as a team, not alone. What should I say when I see her? The blind lady murmured softly, but she did not move her feet at all. Baze summoned a red balloon and released it, after which it floated towards the blind lady. He said, It's all for the sake of avenging First Tail. Your goals are the same. She's also a sensible person. Up till now, she hasn't said that you can't join her. In fact, she might even be looking forward to meeting you. From a certain perspective, the two of you are the same kind of person. Both of you know very well what you want. Bang! The red balloon burst and wisps of fog surrounded the blind lady's body, causing her to stiffen slightly. After a few seconds, she returned to normal. Baze said, Go ahead, I can't let her come in to look for you. You've also slept on her bed before, so I can sense your feelings for her. The blind lady lowered her head and said softly, If you don't feel guilty, it'll be easier to meet her. Then, her body turned into a ball of ink and shattered. When she reappeared again, she was already at the portal of the villa in the mirror. In the dungeon, under second last's gloomy gaze, a long leg emerged from the teleportation portal, after which a figure in a white robe and a circular mask walked out. He couldn't see the face, but he could see that there were no whites of the eyes, no pupils, only pitch-black ink-stained eyes. Second last frowned slightly. He had a familiar figure and a familiar scent, but he was no longer wearing the Guardians of the Night uniform. All of a sudden, the two of them stared at each other silently. The dark dungeon was terrifyingly quiet. If he were to put himself in Second Last's shoes, Jiang Shao wouldn't know how he should feel about facing such a comrade. Second Last's Star Warrior career should have suffered many blows. However, only her closest comrade could really hurt her. She had given all her trust to her comrade, but the blind lady suddenly left. It was hard to imagine how much of a blow it was to Second Last. In the days that followed, Second Last was demoted to the snowfield dimensional space for the rest of her life because she refused to reorganize the team and refused to accept the teammates assigned by her superiors. When Second Last was on a mission, she extended an olive branch to Jiang Shao, who was still in the Stardust stage, and insisted on taking him in. It had nothing to do with strength, and everything was about loyalty. The blind lady was undoubtedly the person who changed Second Last's life. Then, the leader of the team, One Tail, died, and the two of them, who were supposed to never meet each other, met again. As for the blind lady's mentality at this moment, it was even more complicated, so much so that Jiang Shao was a little afraid that she would do something that she shouldn't have done under extreme emotions. At the side, the ghost in the mortar prison also woke up from his dream. The dungeon was still quiet, but there was an undercurrent. Ever since the ghost in the mortar prison entered the Calamity Shadow world, he had never felt such a terrifying atmosphere. What the hell are they? Why are they so imposing? Jiang Shao scratched his head in distress. The atmosphere in the dark environment was terrifying and depressing. If the blind lady wasn't a member of the Starfall squad, what about him? He would have fled long ago. Who could withstand the great sea god of stars and the starry sky warrior? Even the star transformation stage couldn't withstand it. If I had blessings, I would have healed all of you and put you on the bed hand in hand. That's how I should treat you. Jiang Latu did not close the portal because Jiang Shao had no perception and couldn't see clearly in the darkness. He could only rely on the faint light of the portal to see his surroundings. Jiang Shao really couldn't stand the two female stone statues that were staring at each other from afar. He stepped forward and stood between the two of them. He then waved at the ghost in the mortar prison and said, "Waiter, serve the wine." The superior knew Hong. The ghost in the mortar prison hid behind the stone pillar, tilted his head, and looked at Jiang Shao curiously. He hadn't reached the level where he could understand Mandarin yet. Jiang Shao made a gesture as if he was picking up a bowl of rice and chewing on the drumstick while smacking his lip. Mia Mia, the ghost in the mortar prison, reacted and stepped forward to set up a ghost banquet in the dungeon. "Since you're not talking, let's just drink." Jiang Shao threw out the star power thread, and the people on the north and south sides of the table were instantly brought to the ghost banquet table. Whoosh, he was indeed an old tail feather. Their reactions were exactly the same, and the two of them took a step back. It didn't matter if they didn't retreat 2 meters away from the ghost banquet. Jiang Shao picked up the jar of Hong and threw one to Second Last, who was behind him, and the other to Blind Lady. He also picked up a jar of wine and opened the lid. "I came later, so I can't interfere with your affairs. However, at this moment, the three of us have the same goal. After drinking this jar of wine, the two teams will be one for the time being. I don't care how the two of you get along, but there's no room for sloppiness during the mission." As soon as he said that, Jiang Shao raised his head and gulped down the wine. Gulp, 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 burp. He drank half of the wine and spilled half of it. Jiang Shao had just realized that he could even wash his face while drinking so generously. Jiang Shao put down the jar and looked at the two women who were holding wine jars in front and behind him. He couldn't help but purse his lips and say, "I've already finished drinking. What are you two doing?" "You're not feeling at all." Jiang Shao picked up another jar of Hong, opened the lid, and said to Blind Lady in front of him, "Star Advent, Jiang Shao wants you to drink." Blind Lady reached out and grabbed the red cloth lid. Jiang Shao turned around and picked up the jar of wine. He then said to Second Last, "Feather, Jiang Shao wants you to drink." Second last hesitated for a moment before silently pulling out the red cloth lid. Seems like I'm still quite popular, Jiang Shao said as he smacked his lips and gulped down the wine. Blind lady silently took off her stone mask, lowered her eyes, and gulped down the wine. Second last squinted slightly, and all of a sudden, a cold aura filled the entire dungeon, causing the mortar prison ghost to shrink back in fear. However, blind lady remained unmoved and continued to drink from the jar. Second last picked up the jar of wine with one hand and raised her head slightly, after which the not-so-clear wine flowed into her mouth. Blind lady finished drinking the wine in the jar and hugged it in front of her. She lowered her eyes and said softly, "After I turn into a star, I won't disturb you anymore. I won't be an eyesore in front of you." Second last placed the wine jar in front of her face and let the wine flow under the sun. She didn't respond at all. Jiang Shao waved at the mortar prison ghost and asked him to fill up a few jars of wine. He then picked up the newer hong on the table again and threw it to blind lady, as well as second last. Second last grabbed the jar of wine with one hand and raised her head to drink the last drop of wine in the first jar. Jiang Shao grabbed the red cloth lid and opened another jar. "Don't be resentful. You and I only have a few jars of wine. Continue. We're all from Beijing. Let's talk about the future after we finish drinking." Chapter 1198. Tong Tang's novel is a doujinshi that focuses on the setting. Those who like Harry Potter doujinshi shouldn't miss it. 9 Stars of Poison Milk is a new book. Currently typing, please wait for a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1199. Jiang Shao didn't expect that he would drink so much water before he even went to the battlefield. Fortunately, the ghost feast Maiden Red would turn into star power after flowing into his throat. Otherwise, Jiang Shao might have to sleep for the entire day. After temporarily solving the problem of second last and third last, Jiang Shao brought everyone back to the villa and mobilized them before the battle. Of course, the problem of second last and third last couldn't be solved, so the two of them had no choice but to temporarily suppress the conflict in their hearts. Jiang Zhao's 9-star eyes had also locked onto the position of the star transformation Old Demoness. However, it was not a single point but a trajectory. In the past few days, the Old Demoness had gone to many places. The first place she rushed back to was the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean, followed by Haya Beach on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. She should have gone to look for Hopkins. At this moment she was on Sulan Island in the west of the Kingdom of the Unsetting Sun due to the fact that Jiang Shao had transformed the bodies of Xia Yan and Han Jiangxue during the days of letting the tiger return to the mountains. He fell asleep twice. Hence, during the period when he fainted due to exhaustion, he did not have a grasp of the old demonic woman's movement. After thinking about it for a moment, Jiang Shao asked Yi Qingchen to put on the star transformation pendant. Second Last and Blind Lady also put on the pendant, and the members of Star Advent and Tail Feathers were divided into 3 groups, waiting in Jiang Zhao's space. In Jiang Zhao's Calamity Shadow, Gu Shiren, Xia Yan, Han Jiangxue, and Yi Qingchen were waiting. In Second Last's Calamity Shadow, the Great Sage, Ho Mingming, Fu He, Shadow Crow, and Jiang Latu, who had sneaked in. In Blind Lady's Calamity Shadow, the Star Advent team was waiting. Jiang Gong, Little Chongyang, Jiang Kelly, Marta, and Bays. In fact, there was a nesting doll in Blind Lady's space. It was because Jiang Kelly had also absorbed the hailing shelter, which contained the 16 members of the Xianhua organization who had survived the exploration of North America. This was a true suicide squad, and they were so loyal to Jiang Kelly that it made one's hair stand on end. Jin Yaoqi, the leader of the original Fairy Flower organization, and Wang Shiliang, the precious island dog, became the captain and deputy captain of the suicide squad. Wang Shiliang, in particular, was so loyal to Jiang Kelly that he could be described as a loyal dog. Even though the surviving members of the Immortal Flower had been subdued by the savage Jiang Kelly, there were different levels of loyalty. Wang Shiliang was so loyal that he would not hesitate to commit suicide for a word from his leader. Unfortunately, the precious island dog still hadn't realized that he had followed the wrong person. Of course, even if he knew, he probably wouldn't be disloyal. Jiang Shao had given Chui Kelly a unique personality, and the combination of personalities and charms was the reason why Jiang Kelly was born. That was also the reason why she looked like she did now. After splitting into groups and lining up, Jiang Shao, second last, and the blind lady walked out of the Calamity World. They were full of confidence for this trip and were determined to win. The 9-star eyes in Jiang Zhao's eyes flickered. He subconsciously wanted to flash according to the position of the old witch, but he carefully adjusted it. Because Jiang Shao was afraid of traveling back to the past. The old witch had already been on Sulan Island for a while, and Jiang Shao was really afraid that he would get the wrong position and end up traveling back to 3 days ago because of the time factor. Ever since Jiang Shao went back to the past and met the stone carver yesterday, he had been very wary of traveling back in time. In fact, everything that happened last night had given Jiang Shao a huge shock and made him feel a little puzzled. Jiang Shao had a love-hate relationship with the star technique space-time rift. Without a doubt, it could allow him to flash around the world and arrive at his desired location in seconds. It could even allow him to travel back in time. However, this function was severely restricted, and Jiang Shao dared not use it at all. Come to think of it, the void of the space-time rift was space displacement and did not allow for dimensional travel. Even if the space door was opened in front of the door, Jiang Shao would not be able to flash in. However, the time travel allowed Jiang Shao to travel from the Calamity World to the alien sphere and return to the past. Isn't this also a type of dimensional travel? No wonder returning to the past through the space-time rift could cause space-time to collapse and the timeline to be riddled with holes. It was because the attribute of time did not follow the basic laws. Jiang Shao had a feeling that he could personify the time and void of the space-time rift and treat them as two guys with completely different personalities. When she is like a spoiled, doting mother of her son, Kong was more like a law-abiding, rule-abiding father who was extremely strict with his son. Father Kong said, "Child, you can teleport in the same dimension and even flash around the world, but you are absolutely not allowed to teleport across dimensions. That's against the rules. That will destroy your world and everyone else." Mother Sure said, "What's wrong, child? Your father only allowed you to teleport, but not cross dimensions? It's okay, child, let's ignore your father. Mommy loves you. He and I are a family and we are both your parents. You just have to listen to Mommy. You walk in Mommy's timeline. Although our main focus is time, Mommy will still allow you to cross dimensions in the process. Don't cry, child. Your father can control you, but he can't control me." If Jiang Shao really became a spoiled child, it seemed that, sooner or later, he would be spoiled by his doting mother and eventually lead to a huge disaster. At the thought of this, Jiang Shao had a peculiar expression on his face, as he felt that he seemed to have figured something out. "Master, I figured it out?" There was another question that made Jiang Shao a little puzzled. Can Hopkins travel through time and return to the past? If he can, will he travel through time like crazy to make his star slots more reasonable? In that case, has Hopkins also created many space-time branches? Or is traveling through time exclusive to the star technique, space-time rift? Judging from Hopkins' history of struggle, the main stage in which he became a god was in the European continent. In the European battlefield, his teleportation star technique should be Instant of Shattering Water. If the Instant of Shattering Water is upgraded to Scorching Yang quality, will it not have the ability to travel through time? Judging from the name of the star technique, Jiang Shao should be able to conclude that Hopkins probably did not have the ability to return to the past. However, that contradicted the theory of origin. Jiang Shao knew that be it the Calamity Ruins or the Ocean Ridge Refuge, they would both be a planet or even a universe after being upgraded to the highest quality. Under such a premise, all other star techniques of the same type should have the same effect after being upgraded to the highest quality. Jiang Shao frowned and could not figure it out. He was more willing to believe that the instant of shattering water did not have the ability to travel through time and space. Otherwise, the space-time he was in would have completely collapsed because of Hopkins's messing around. At this moment, Hopkins was basking in the sun on the beach of the Mediterranean Sea every day, waiting for the day he would die of old age. How hopeless was his heart! How anxious was he! If he could travel through time and space, he would definitely change history. Hence, judging from the current stable state of spacetime, Jiang Shao had reason to infer that Hopkins did not know how terrifying the scorching young spacetime rift was, nor did he have the ability to travel through time and space. While he was letting his imagination run wild, Second Last asked in a hoarse voice, "What's the matter?" It's nothing." Jiang Shao snapped back to his senses and repositioned the position of the star transformation old demoness. He held the 9-star eyes and asked, "Are you ready?" Second Last said, "Yes." Blind Lady said, "Okay." Whoosh, the trio's figures disappeared in a flash, and they arrived at a gravel beach. Behind them, there was an endless sea with waves crashing against the reefs again and again. Under the sea breeze, the beautiful sounds of bagpipes and harps could be vaguely heard on the sea cliff. The sound not only formed a beautiful melody, but it was also a star technique. The music entered their ears, and in less than 2 seconds, the three of them felt a sense of comfort. It was a wonderful feeling of joy that came out of nowhere. Jiang Shao couldn't help but smile. Jiang Shao really wanted to slap himself. "What are you smiling for?" Baffling, he looked at the safety buckle on Blind Lady's chest and realized that there were no signs of it shattering. Jiang Shao put a finger to his lips and gestured for her to keep quiet. He then pointed upwards. Phew! The huge waves once again crashed against the sea cliff violently and the waves surged. Both Blind Lady and Second Last had the star technique Star Demon, which allowed them to move freely on land and in the deep sea. Such star techniques were not as old-fashioned as the introduction. After the waves soaked the cliff, the two of them could walk up the wet and steep cliff because they could move freely in the water as long as there were water stains on the cliff. If Jiang Shao could activate the field tier now, they would be able to step on the water droplets and walk in the air. The two of them stepped on the sea cliff that was almost at a 90-degree angle and walked upward. Jiang Shao also floated up with the soul of the sea devourer. A few seconds later, the three of them appeared on the sea cliff. They looked into the distance and saw a huge black and white stone house that could be called a manor. The black and white stone manor was surrounded by wooden fences, and in the courtyard, there were two guys who should not have been there. They were fighting valiantly. They were two headless horsemen who were riding huge undead fire horses. They were clad in exquisite stone armors, wielding blazing lances in their hands and flaming shields in their hands. The figures of the two headless horsemen, one black and the other white, crossed each other, and the undead fire horses galloped far away before the two of them turned around and faced each other, seemingly about to start the next round of battle. The two ferocious headless horsemen were fighting with their lives, but there were a few dwarves who were less than 50 centimeters tall at the side of the battle. They were holding small bagpipes and harps in their hands, singing, dancing, and playing music, filling the black and white stone manor with a cheerful atmosphere. The cheerful atmosphere did not fit in with the two headless horsemen who were fighting with their lives. It also did not fit in with the melancholy and beautiful woman who was standing beside the dwarves. It could be seen that the elegant and charming woman was depressed to a certain extent, perhaps even reaching the level of depression. She leaned forward in her chair, placed her elbows on the table, and rested her chin on the back of her hand while staring at the two headless horsemen who were trying hard to please her. But whether it was the pleasant music or the two headless horsemen who were risking their lives, none of them could make her happy at all. Jiang Shao frowned slightly and glanced at second last who was beside him. He initially thought that this was the lair of Hua Xing, but it now seemed more like a private manor. This old woman knew how to enjoy life. Jiang Shao didn't think that the exquisite musical instruments in the dwarf's hands and the chair she was sitting on were made in the alien ball. He reckoned that they were obviously high-end goods from human society and should have been brought up by her. Second last's perception was only of gold quality, but the blind lady's was of diamond quality. Jiang Shao turned to look at the blind lady and raised his eyebrows slightly. The blind lady shook her head and mouthed, "No one." Jiang Shao scratched his head and gestured with his hands. Whoosh! The trio suddenly appeared at the table. The old woman was dumbfounded. Whoosh! Under her chair, an ink flower suddenly bloomed. Jiang Shao sat on the table and stared at the plentiful plate of fruits and the purple peel on the table. He picked up a purple fruit and tossed it into his mouth without peeling it. Tasted strange, like grapes. Jiang Shao flicked his fingers and picked up the fruits on the plate. "What are you doing? Catherine, are you on vacation?" Gulp. The old woman named Catherine swallowed her saliva and tensed up while staring at the trio who suddenly appeared with a nervous expression. Apart from Jiang Shao, who seemed rather relaxed, the other two women stood behind him silently like two godly bodyguards. Catherine wanted to flash away immediately, but her figure did not move at all, and she was still sitting on the chair obediently. Below her chair, the black ink flower was still blooming faintly. Catherine said, Jiang Xiaopi, why are you?" Jiang Shao ate another grape and grinned at Catherine. "Why aren't you chasing after me anymore? I've been waiting for you for several days, yet you're here listening to songs and watching the knights compete? Have you forgotten the trial mission that the prophet gave you?" Jiang Shao then leaned forward and rubbed Catherine's head. "I have to criticize you." Jiang Shao wiped the juice on his fingers with her hair and chided with a stern expression, "Child, you're very insincere." Chapter 1200. What happened? Jiang Shao asked as he sat on the table and picked through the fruits on the plate. Catherine's expression changed. She tried to stand up, only to find that she had succeeded. However, she used a little too much force. She should have stood up from the chair, but instead, she bounced a little. Such a reckless action was completely different from her usual elegant and indifferent appearance. It could be seen that she was very flustered. Catherine was not a fool. Not only was she not a fool, but she was also a very smart person and a fence-sitter who fawned on the rich and powerful. Long after Jiang Shao killed the two-star conversion members in front of her, Catherine had already shown signs of defecting to the enemy. However, Plato was still around at that time, so Catherine did not rebel directly. However, there was one thing that Catherine did personally. She was an accomplice in killing Ming. In a sense, she helped Jiang Shao kill Ming. The blood bat, whose wings had been pierced by Jiang Zhao's arrow, begged frantically and screeched for help from his teammates in the last chapter of his life. However, Catherine, the only medical awakened star warrior in the team, did not save him. She did not heal her teammate who was gradually withering, and she simply allowed her teammate to melt and die bit by bit. That was a sign that Catherine was wavering. Without a doubt, Jiang Zhao's words, "I can give you what the prophet can give you," before the battle caused a crack in Catherine's heart. Hence, Jiang Shao suddenly appeared there and got ready to say a few words to the smart fence-sitter. Catherine did not escape because she was smart. She knew very well that being able to move now did not mean that she had the upper hand, nor did it mean that she really had the freedom to control her body. "Child, what are you thinking about?" Jiang Shao looked at Catherine smilingly while eating the strange fruits. The word child and Jiang Zhao's current state showed that he indeed had the potential to become a demon king. What made Catherine truly afraid was that she realized that she did not reject such a form of address in her heart. At some point in time, Jiang Zhao in front of her had already become the prophet who stayed behind to guard the coast of the Mediterranean Sea in her heart. Jiang Zhao looked up at Catherine and said, "Tell me, what happened? Why are you daydreaming here?" Catherine took a deep breath and said, "Hua Xing doesn't welcome me back." Jiang Zhao was stunned. Huh! Wasn't this old fellow an aging star? What? Kicked out of the organization? Catherine glanced at second last and the blind lady discreetly. She moved her feet and stood beside the chair, giving up her seat. She said, "Lord Prophet didn't express any dissatisfaction with our team, but the other planet conversion members are very dissatisfied and unwilling to accept me again." Jiang Zhao had a strange expression on his face. How could that old man be unhappy? He was probably laughing in his heart right now. Do you really think he's giving you a mission? Is it really a test of your piety? Is he really going to lead you to the next stage of your life like a saint? He's just using you, and he even called it a trial for you. Catherine sighed deeply and said, "Once, when the prophet issued the mission, there were two voices within the star transformation. One of them thought that the trial taker given by the prophet must be an extremely powerful existence. Hence, the star transformation hoped that we could take it seriously and carry out the mission together to find the trial taker. The other voice came from Plato. When he found out that the trial taker was a child who was less than 20 years old, he led the four of us to look for you. In the end, you saw it too." Jiang Zhao blinked and thought, there are factions within the star transformation? He initially thought that it was a small team of 12 people. Besides, Jiang Zhao and his team had already dealt with 4 official star transformation members and 1 reserve member on Earth. There shouldn't be many star transformation members on the alien ball, but it seemed that the star transformation wasn't shallow either. So, did Liana, Baze, Nana Z, and the others recruit many talents from all over the country and send them to the alien ball to add new blood to the star transformation? Catherine seemed to have understood something. She became more cooperative, and the words that came out of her mouth became more biased. Plato has paid the price for his arrogance and ignorance. His team has been annihilated. Jiang Zhao grinned and didn't accept Catherine's sugar-coated bullet. He continued to ask, "So, after you returned to the star transformation, what happened?" Catherine raised the corner of her mouth slightly and sneered disdainfully. "They didn't want to be with me and thought that we had shamed the star transformation. The most important thing was that we didn't please the prophet and didn't let the prophet see our piety. The star transformation kicked me out of Hope City." From her expression and between the lines, Jiang Zhao could see that some people were really hopeless. Their arrogance, and stupidity were engraved in their bones. It was more like a biological characteristic, hidden in their genes, and there was no way to erase it. Catherine had hit a brick wall and reached the Yellow River, but at this moment, she was still describing other people with a condescending attitude and a mocking expression. Jiang Zhao was very sure that if it wasn't for the fact that her life was in the hands of Wei Feather, Catherine wouldn't have given in at this moment. The City of Hope? Jiang Zhao temporarily put aside other factors because he heard a new term. Catherine could be said to have said everything she knew. She said, "That is a city located at the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean. That city was built by the prophet himself 60 years ago. The glorious traces of the prophet's conquest of the European continent were left there. When we connected the statue of the young man reading at the bottom of the sea with the prophet, the members of the star transformation began to maintain and renovate the underwater city to show their respect for the prophet." Jiang Zhao was a little confused. He was still too inexperienced. Look at Hopkins. With a book called Star Warrior Era, he painted a big picture for the Star Conversion sect and gave them a blank check. He gained a group of believers and fooled the members of the Star Conversion sect, making them work for him willingly. What about Jiang Shao? Jiang Shao also had Star Warrior era and the ability to transform the human body, but he didn't make good use of it. Look at the big cat beside him. Jiang Shao had transformed her body, and she even picked him up when she was eating just now. She didn't show any respect at all. She didn't look like a believer at all. Then, Second Last said. Catherine glanced at Second Last discreetly, and had long recognized the powerful woman who had killed the shield warrior Carlson. She said, "The City of Hope no longer welcomes me. They think that I've let the star transformation and the prophet down, so they kicked me out." Second Last said in a hoarse voice, "Tell me something I don't know." However, Catherine lowered her head and looked at Jiang Shao. Her actions and gaze seemed to be asking for Jiang Zhao's approval. She's really an aging star. She's already starting to use small gestures to express her loyalty. Jiang Shao had to admit that such subtle gestures were very useful for a certain type of person. Compared to those who were macho and feminist, especially those who were greedy for power, they would really fall for it. People would change. In particular, for Star Warriors, they would speak with their fists and be able to control the life and death of others. As their strength increased, they would break away from the shackles of the secular world, and their mentality would change more and more. Besides, there was no order to speak of in the alien sphere. Catherine was blinded. She didn't know that the big cat had already molded Jiang Shao for several years and had already molded him into a man. "Speak," Jiang Shao said. "In order to not let the prophet down, the star transformation is trying his best to track down your whereabouts. He's going all out to make sure that you're killed," Catherine said. Jiang Shao was amused and asked, "Why? Aren't you going to be fair, just, and open this time? Don't you intend to fight me one-on-one?" Kathleen said, "I'm not too sure. Maybe it was the prophet who spoke, asking Hua Xing to face you in a familiar way." Jiang Shao pursed his lips and asked, "How many people does the star transformation have now?" 24, Catherine replied. Jiang Shao was dumbfounded. What happened to the promised 12? Kathleen continued, "Some of the lower-class laborers were accepted into the Star Conversion Organization as an exception due to the destruction of Plato's team and became official members. They also obtained the star beads that the Star Transformation Organization has obtained from all over the world over the years and transformed into powerful Star Warriors. They're preparing for battle and are just waiting for you to appear. Unfortunately, I haven't heard from you in the past few days." In the past few days, Jiang Shao had been transforming people in the Calamity Shadow world. Jiang Zhao's heart skipped a beat and he said, "Where did you guys get the news about me previously?" Catherine looked at Jiang Shao apologetically and said, "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't know." Jiang Zhao's face turned sullen, and he looked at Catherine with hostility. However, Catherine lowered her head and said respectfully, "It's true, sir. I didn't know that Plato led a team to hunt you down. I got the news from the leader of the organization." Jiang Shao looked at Catherine's beautiful and charming face and stared at her silently for a long time. Catherine lowered her head and looked very respectful, as if she had accepted her fate. She didn't seem to be lying. Of course, it would take time to find out whether she was lying or not. Besides, regardless of whether Catherine was lying or not, she was already a Mecca in Jiang Zhao's eyes at this moment. Jiang Shao changed the topic and said, "After you came back, did you go to the prophet?" Catherine replied, "After I was kicked out of Hapa City, I went to the prophet and reported everything to him, but he didn't give me any response. I had to leave because I didn't dare to disturb him." "Okay." Jiang Shao nodded in his heart. Her route of action was true and she didn't lie, but there were still some problems. Jiang Shao asked, "Shouldn't you report to the prophet immediately? Why did you go to Hapa City first?" Catherine's eyes flashed with a fierce look, but she hid it well. "I was worried about the prophet's anger, so I asked the leader to go to the Xia coast with me, but I was kicked out of Hapa City by my former teammates. In fact, Jiang Shao asked, "What?" Catherine said in a deep voice, "Some people even wanted to kill me so that I could apologize to the prophet and admit that I made a mistake." Okay. Jiang Shao nodded and took a bite of the fruit and melon. "What a good show!" Jiang Shao sighed and said, "Your organization is really good." "Really? Pious?" Catherine was speechless. The blind lady suddenly asked, "Is she still useful?" Upon hearing this, Catherine turned pale with fright and finally couldn't maintain her composure anymore. Just as she was about to retreat, a strange ink flower bloomed in front of her chest. Second Last squinted and stared at the exquisite ink flowers, after which she also felt the powerful control effect. However, Jiang Shao waved his hand and gestured for the blind lady to stop. The blind lady's eyes were pitch black, and her face was hidden in the mask. Hence, Jiang Shao couldn't see her expression, but she was very obedient. The blind lady pressed her slender fingers gently, and the flower on Catherine's chest withered, turning into a ball of oil that stained Catherine's expensive dress. Jiang Shao asked, "Child, what's your nickname?" "Kate." "Catherine?" Without hesitation, Catherine hurriedly answered, "Kate." Jiang Shao nodded and said, "In that case, Kate, are you ready to use your piety on the right path?" Catherine nodded repeatedly and said, "Of course, sir. From the moment you appeared, I think I already knew what kind of path I should take." The blind lady had a peculiar expression on her face behind the mask. She thought, "Father." "Father?" Jiang Shao said in satisfaction, "I can tell that you have some resentment towards the star conversion mission that got rid of you. In that case, let's go and kill the star conversion mission together. You're my first believer, and I'm going to seek justice for you." Second Last and the blind lady were speechless. Catherine hesitated for a moment before asking, "Are you going to go against the prophet?" Jiang Shao smiled and said, "When you guys appeared in front of me, why did I immediately recognize you guys?" Catherine obviously had some guesses, but she was very compatible with Jiang Shao. She asked, "Why?" Jiang Shao answered, "Because the prophet gave you guys the star conversion mission, and he also gave me a trial mission. However, I'm on equal footing with the prophet. I'm not his believer, but his partner. Now that you've left the star conversion mission, come with me to carry out the trial mission." Catherine stared at Jiang Shao in a daze and nodded gently. She seemed to have no choice. Jiang Shao said, "Child, this is the first lesson I'm teaching you. Have you learned how to reverse the operation and reverse the trial?" Catherine was speechless. Jiang Shao said, Go into the house and get a few chairs. Tell me everything about the star conversion mission. Flash away, don't waste time." As soon as he said that, they were all stunned. Jiang Shao smiled and said, "She's not silly. I can travel halfway across the world to find her. It's useless for her to escape to." Upon hearing this, the blind lady tapped her finger gently and the ink under the chair shattered. Catherine hesitated for a moment and tried to flash away. She really did. Second Last looked at Jiang Shao and said, "She can open up space and hide in it." Jiang Shao said, "Give our child some confidence. Can't you tell how devoted she is to me?" Second Last sneered and said, "If there's such a child, I'll crush her to death with my own hands." As soon as she said that, Catherine flashed back with two gorgeous and comfortable chairs. Jiang Shao gestured to the band and said, "Kate, ask them to stop for a while. This song is too joyful and I'm getting a little carried away." Chapter 12:01. In the black and white manor, Jiang Shao and the others gathered around the table and were secretly plotting something. Upon hearing Catherine's words, Jiang Shao seemed to be a little surprised. "You called the Star Warriors of the Starry Sky stage lowly peasants?" Catherine hesitated for a moment and realized that Jiang Zhao's star power level might not be very high. She organized her words and tried her best to avoid making Jiang Shao unhappy. From the perspective of a warrior, the middle stage of the Starry Sky stage is much stronger than the early stage of the Starry Sky stage, and the late stage is much stronger than the middle stage. There's a huge gap between the two, and the physical attributes are enhanced in all aspects. So, when Jiang Shao heard that among the 24 celestial conversion members, there were some so-called lower-class coolies and untouchables, he didn't think much of it, but when Jiang Shao heard that all of them were Starry Sky cultivators, even the weakest among them was at the early stage Starry Sky cultivator, Jiang Shao was a little dumbfounded. Once again, he was sure that Star Conversion was the world's #1 criminal organization. The Starry Sky stage was worthless? Of course not. The Starry Sky realm was very valuable. Extremely valuable. This time, the Huaxia army brought a lot of top experts to the alien world. But after more than a month, no one had entered the Starry Sky phase. If it was the case for the Huaxia army, then it was the same for the rest of the world. The Star Conversion Organization only seized the first opportunity and arrived here more than a year earlier than the others. Xia Family Saber Technique, Diamond Quality LV8. While thinking about it, Jiang Shao received information from the internal star map, which made him slightly distracted. What kind of person was Catherine? She could tell that something was wrong with Jiang Shao. She couldn't help but panic and wonder, did I offend the little prophet? Kathleen still wanted to say something, but Jiang Shao continued, other than these 24 people, is there anything else we need to pay attention to in the undersea city of Hope? Yes. There are sea soul fish demons there. There are Andromedas everywhere, and they are all high-level ones. Their left and right hands are wrapped with spirit lock and spirit chain, Catherine hurriedly replied. Jiang Shao asked, Andromeda? I mean. Catherine came back to her senses and said apologetically, Andromeda. Sorry, sir, I'm used to it. Jiang Shao said, it's a resentful spirit. What Andromeda, don't give me these fancy names. Second last frowned slightly and thought, the chain vengeful spirit is a full set of chain vengeful spirit. That's going to be a little tricky. Damage output, defense, control, healing, whatever you want, you have it. It's your own system. Compared to the Sea Soul Demon Fish, the Sea Soul Mask, and the Sea Soul Lamp, the Sea Soul 3-piece set was even stronger. Catherine continued, Hua Xing is prepared to follow in the footsteps of the Prophet and conquer the European continent, recreate the glory of the Prophet, and embark on the Prophet's path to godhood. There were some sculptures at the bottom of the sea. Among them, there were 3 types of creatures: sea, land, and air. Unfortunately, one of the creatures produced in the Lan Shi region was already extinct. Hua Xing found the Sea Spirit tribe of the North Atlantic Ocean and the Centaur tribe of the Xia Kingdom, but he couldn't find the Golden Feather Walker that represented the Air Force. In the end, he replaced them with the resentful spirits of the Arctic Ocean. Jiang Shao thought of something and said, Sea Soul Fish Demons don't seem to be qualified warriors? They boast about their nobility, but their vaginas are messy. Catherine's eyes lit up when she heard that. Her expression was a little unnatural as she said, in the alien sphere, the sea spirits are very intelligent. They like the City of Hope very much, so they settled here. Second Last and the blind lady both discovered Catherine's strange behavior and thought about the handsome face of the Sea Soul Fish Demons. All of a sudden, the two of them seemed to have understood something. This old guy? Is he really that carefree? Jiang Shao obviously didn't notice that. He thought quickly and said, the resentful spirits are creatures of the Arctic Ocean and were left in Hapa by Hua Xing. Are they also in a friendly cooperative relationship? Do they like underwater cities? Catherine shook her head with a solemn expression and said, no, they're different from the Sea Soul Fish Demons. The resentful spirits were forcibly brought to the city and enslaved. Jiang Zhao's eyes lit up and he asked, are you sure? Catherine said, Yes, there are 600 resentful spirits, and I personally participated in the capture of 400 of them. We originally wanted to capture the Sea Devourer and station them in the city, but the Sea Devourer's star technique is too domineering, and it will cause the water to be filled with star power water that can melt everything. Besides, they are very intelligent and united. They once joined forces to kill a member of Hua Xing. Jiang Shao smiled and tilted his head, rubbing the collar of the black cloak with the side of his face. Unfortunately, the Sea Devourer robe couldn't understand English and didn't know that someone was praising their race. Catherine thought about it and continued, "In fact, Hua Xing has made many enemies, such as the wave chasers that are distributed in the Atlantic Ocean, and those creatures that are similar to dolphins, white dolphins, and killer whales. Sir, maybe you should take note that the wave chasers are widely distributed and often migrate north and south. If you're in the shallow waters of the Atlantic Ocean, you must be careful when you encounter the wave chasers. They will attack you without hesitation." Jiang Shao blinked and asked, "Why?" "I'm not Hua Xing," Catherine said. "You're a human." Jiang Shao smacked his lips and said, "What a stupid teammate." With his own strength, he made the wave chasers become the mortal enemy of the entire human race. From the perspective of race alone, Jiang Shao and Hua Xing belonged to the same species of human beings and could barely be called teammates. Catherine pondered for a moment and said, "The wave chasers have a special way of communicating with each other. Their intelligence is too high and they are extremely united. Hua Xing once tried to negotiate with them to become a mount in the sea or a guard of Hapa City, but was rejected by the wave chasers. Then, Hua Xing tried to use forceful means to suppress them. After destroying 3 small groups, all the wave chasers in the entire Atlantic Ocean regarded Hua Xing as their mortal enemy. They didn't randomly encounter Hua Xing and start a battle. Instead, they organized and assembled a race army to search for Hua Xing in the North Atlantic Ocean. However, due to their biological characteristics, they can't enter the deep sea, so they're still living in harmony." Jiang Shao was stunned. This group of dolphins, white dolphins and killer whales were so fierce? They suppressed Hua Xing in the deep sea and didn't dare to come out? Jiang Shao suddenly realized that he had always been very lucky. Ever since he dived into the North Atlantic Ocean from the surface of the sea on Earth, Jiang Shao had never entered the deep sea from the shallow sea. He didn't take this route and always flashed into the deep sea directly. Otherwise, Jiang Shao would have been shattered by the wave chasers a long time ago. The wave chasers' pure sound-type shockwave attack was very difficult to avoid. Even if you covered your ears, it wouldn't delay the shattering of your body. Jiang Shao didn't have candlelight endurance at this time. It was normal for him to bleed from all orifices and his body to shatter. Jiang Shao stood up abruptly and almost flipped the table. In his mind, there was already an image of flipping the table. For all. His heart was filled with hatred. It feels so much better. If it continues, I can still bear with it for a while. What a sin! Jiang Shao looked uncomfortable and scratched his head in distress. They're such intelligent and united creatures. Why didn't you take the opportunity to form alliances and befriend them to fight against the real overlords of the deep sea? Instead, you push the wave chasers to the opposite side of humans? In the future, when the brutal sea demons, Burning Sea Clan, Serene Sea Clan, and Shattered Water Clan break through the coastline and kill their way onto land, what would happen to humans? Would they be completely annihilated? It's not like you don't have the sea demon's star beads. Don't you understand the purpose of the amphibious sea demon star technique? The burning sea, tranquil sea, and shattered water did not need to be amphibious at all. They could land directly. As for the Star Sea Demon clan, which could not land due to their biological characteristics, God even gave them amphibious sea demons. This, alright, Hua Xing didn't care at all. Kill, hurry up, Jiang Shao suddenly said. Hey, damn it, I've got to find a chance to repair my relationship with the Wave Clan. The humming whale and the poo-poo whale should be able to talk to each other. Second Last stretched her hand out and pointed at the location of the Pantheon on the map. She said, Hua Xing Xing mostly has the Diamond Sea Demon technique. Sneak attacks are impossible for them. We should go straight to the root of the problem. Upon hearing this, Jiang Shao glared at Catherine and thought, this old woman has advanced star techniques, but she doesn't even have the sea demon technique. How can she be an aging star? Don't you know how to configure your star techniques more reasonably? Don't you know that you're going to become my mecha in the future? Catherine couldn't understand Mandarin and didn't quite understand why Jiang Shao was glaring at her. Hence, she had no choice but to remain silent. Second Last looked at Catherine and asked in English, when do the members of Hua Xing worship the gods? Catherine raised her wrist and looked at the expensive watch. She said, there's one every day at around 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. It's 10 a.m. now and there should be some people in the Pantheon, but not all of them will be there. Most of the members will be carrying out missions. That's even better. It's a little difficult to catch them all at once. It's better to deal with them in batches, Jiang Shao said with a nod. Second Last said in a low voice, let's go. Wait, Jiang Shao said all of a sudden. Second Last asked, huh? Jiang Shao glanced at the blind lady thoughtfully and said, previously, we didn't have much information, so we equipped the team with star techniques for underwater survival. But now, my believer has told us a lot of information. Upon hearing the word believer, Catherine was overjoyed, but she didn't show it on her face. She really hoped that little prophet could accept her. Putting aside the possibility of starting a new life with her, her personal safety would at least be guaranteed for the time being. Jiang Shao said, instead of going straight to the root of the problem, we might as well wait for them to fall into our trap. Second Last's eyes lit up and she said, continue. Jiang Shao reached out and gestured at the spacious courtyard of the manor. At the end of the day, the deep sea is not our home ground. Wei Yu, Xinglin, set up an ambush here. I'll go and teleport all the Hua Xing members who are on a pilgrimage in the Pantheon here. The blind lady said calmly, do you know where Hapa City is? Yeah. Jiang Shao nodded and said, I went to Hope City in the lower dimension with the Shima royal family. That's where I met the humming whale. The blind lady was a little flustered. The toxic healer has been to Hapa City? He had already entered the deep sea of the North Atlantic Ocean when he was on Earth? So, Catherine has been explaining things to Second Last and me, while the toxic healer was just listening for fun? He knew everything. He knew everything about the lost civilization, all kinds of underwater buildings, all kinds of terrains. He knew all about it when he was listening to Catherine's explanation of the undersea city. He was surprised, amazed, confused, and indignant. His emotions were as numerous as those of a woman who visited him every few days. What was he doing? He's so good at hiding it. He's really good at acting. The blind lady felt like she had been cheated. We agreed to work hard and travel around the world together. Why did you secretly travel around the world? In fact, Jiang Shao had double insurance because the 9-star eyes had once located the location of Catherine's trip to the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean. Hence, there would definitely not be any problems. Unless Jiang Shao was hot-headed and accidentally traveled through time and space to return to the ruins of the seabed in the lower dimension a few years ago, of course, Jiang Shao wouldn't be hot-headed for such a serious task. Okay, set up the array formation. Second Last immediately agreed with Jiang Zhao's decision and opened the door of the Scourge ruins. At the same time, the blind lady and Jiang Shao also opened the space door. However, Jiang Latu did not appear. Jiang Shao wouldn't be muddle-headed. If Catherine saw that Plato had become a mecha, she would definitely be disloyal. It was one thing for his life to be in the hands of others, but it was another for him to die and become a mecha. At this moment, Catherine still had some hope, but once Jiang Latu was exposed, she would have no hope at all. Jiang Shao had only met Plato once and he couldn't imitate him perfectly. Hence, it would be difficult for him to deceive Catherine. Hence, he decided to be more cautious. Catherine was taken aback when she saw this. She didn't expect that there would be such an elite team hidden in their space. Although Catherine could not understand Mandarin, she could guess their intentions when she saw everyone's actions. Catherine frantically said, "Sir, if you want to lure them out, you'll definitely be attacked by the wave chasers when you come up from the deep sea." Jiang Shao waved his hand and said, "I'll teleport them all up." Catherine frantically said, "Hope City is heavily guarded and has always prohibited the existence of Space Series star techniques." Jiang Shao suddenly extended his hand and pressed it against Catherine's head. "Child, you're doubting me. Aren't you being very insincere?" "No, Prophet." Catherine immediately changed the way she addressed him. She clasped her hands in front of her chest and lowered her head slightly. "I trust you absolutely, completely." At the side, the members of the tail feather team were also a little dumbfounded. As soon as he came out, he saw the powerful Kathleen with a submissive and obedient look. At this moment, she was clasping her hands together and bowing her head to apologize to Jiang Shao while mumbling something. "What's going on? Did I trick a veteran into coming? Star transformation, great God? This little toxic healer. Has she become a charlatan?" Chapter 1202. In the black and white manner, a group of soldiers set up a trap and took their positions. Jiang Shao also summoned his humming whale, puff whale, howling dragon, and humming bear. "Pick, baby, who do you want to be with?" Jiang Shao held the black and white candle in his arms and pointed at the four divine beasts. "Whose card do you want to play today?" Everyone present had high perception. Although some of them were lying in ambush far away, they still heard Jiang Zhao's words. Ho Mingming was hiding under the cliff, shooting an arrow and adjusting the angle. Hearing this, she couldn't help but look at Jiang Gong, who was also shooting an arrow with a bow. Jiang Gong shrugged his shoulders, held a translucent arrow in his hand, put it to his mouth, and blew on it. "Do you feel like an ancient emperor doting on his concubine?" Hum, 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 ow. For a moment the dragon, whale, and bear cried out one after another, but their voices were very soft. They were not showing off their strength, but more like they were whispering to Little Candle, "Come to my bowl." Little Candle's round body rubbed against Jiang Zhao's arms. It looked at the humming bear in front of it, then looked at the whale and the imprisoned dragon in the sky. It pursed its lips, suddenly jumped up, and spun around. It raised its cute little face, looked up at Jiang Shao, blinked its candle eyes, and rubbed against Jiang Zhao's chest. Swoosh! The next moment, the sea-devouring robe's body was burning with flames in a spiral pattern. It was beautiful. Jiang Shao smiled and patted his sleeves. "Sea-devouring robe, it seems that Little Candle likes you more." The sea-devouring robe raised its two little hands and rubbed Jiang Zhao's face. For a moment the dragon, whale, and bear cried out in dissatisfaction. From the emotions transmitted to Jiang Shao by the humming whale, Jiang Shao felt that they did not think that Little Candle and the sea-devouring robe were more intimate, but because the sea-devouring robe was on Jiang Shao. Clearly, Little Candle was aiming for Jiang Shao. All of a sudden, Jiang Shao felt a headache coming on. He hurriedly comforted the mythical pets. All right. I was wrong. Stop arguing." At the side, Catherine, the veteran star conversion member, did not fit in with Jiang Zhao's team. She did not shamelessly communicate with anyone, nor did she hide herself. Instead, she stayed by Jiang Zhao's side like a devout believer. Catherine's heart was filled with admiration for this sudden scene. No wonder he was on an equal footing with the prophet. No wonder he was the little prophet. Just look at those astral pets. Since little prophet could pamper his pets so much, as long as I showed my loyalty, he should be able to forgive my mistakes, wearing the sea-devouring robe that was burning with flames. Jiang Shao gestured to Catherine and said, "Tell them to give us some background music later." As the most useless person at the moment, Kathleen immediately nodded and said, "Sir, what song would you like to listen to? These 7 little dwarfs were formed and trained by me. They can perform most of the famous songs in the world." Jiang Shao was slightly stunned and thought, "There's a surprise?" In terms of star techniques alone, the dwarf musicians can play 3 types of music: happy, sad, and hypnotic. Jiang Shao didn't expect this band to be so versatile. Jiang Shao asked, "Does Good Day know how to brag? Is today a good day where everything you want to do will come true?" Catherine was speechless. Xia Yan's laughter could be heard from afar. She hurriedly covered her mouth with one hand and looked at Han Jiangxue behind her apologetically. Xia Yan knew that she shouldn't be smiling mischievously during such a tense preparation period, but the toxic healer was too abominable. He would sing lyrics at the slightest disagreement. Who could stand him? Han Jiangxue glared at Xia Yan, only to discover that Gu Shi and Yi Qingchen were trying their best to hold back their laughter. She said, "Ever since we went to the alien planet, I haven't held a meeting for you guys to enforce discipline." "Sorry, Commander," Yi Qingchen said softly. Gu Shi grinned and rubbed his Mohican hair that had been blown away by the sea breeze. In the middle of the courtyard of the manor, Jiang Shao looked at Catherine's silent expression and couldn't help but purse his lips. "This is a famous Chinese song. Let them learn it next time." Catherine immediately nodded and said, "Okay, sir. I'll make the arrangements immediately after the mission." Jiang Shao said, "Give them some songs that are suitable for combat. Don't add any star techniques. Just let them play normally." Catherine asked, "Massachusetts Mass, what do you think? You choose." Jiang Shao waved his hand casually. He didn't know much about the song and thus didn't know the name. However, he reckoned that the melody would sound familiar. Jiang Shao said, "In a while, after I leave, activate the King Broken Ring." "Sir, I promise that my soul will tremble because of you when you destroy the star transformation star in this magnificent piece of music," Catherine said with a smirk. It seemed that she had an ulterior motive for choosing such a song. Jiang Shao was dumbfounded. Jiang Shao was just acting on a whim. Catherine seemed to be trying to stir up trouble. Jiang Shao ignored Catherine's sugar-coated words and did not amplify his voice. Instead, he switched to Mandarin and continued, "8 tails, after I leave, activate the King Broken Ring and envelop the entire manor." In the distance, Han Jiangxue answered softly, "Got it." The 4 members of the Tail Feather Squad stood on the east side of the courtyard, while the 4 members of the Tail Feather Brigade stood on the west side of the courtyard. Shadow Crow, Great Sage, Fu Hei, Little Chongyang. There seems to be something strange mixed in? They had already lined up and were just waiting for the enemy to enter the trap. At the edge of the sea cliff on the south, Jiang Gong, Ho Mingming, Baze, and Jiang Kelly were all ready to attack. On the north side, Second Last and Blind Lady stood with their hands behind their back. The 2 of them were separated by a long distance, and they had the fewest members. However, Jiang Shao did not think that they were the weakest link in the encirclement. Jiang Shao waved his hand at Yi Qingchen, and Yi Qingchen replaced Jiang Zhao's safety buckle with a new one just in case. Jiang Shao stood in the middle of the courtyard and circled around before looking at the inescapable trap in satisfaction. Tail Feather. Star Advent. Prepare for battle. All of a sudden, the atmosphere in the entire black and white manor became tense. Jiang Shao patted the burning sea-devouring robe on his body and disappeared in a flash. As Jiang Shao flickered away, Catherine also flickered away. The blind lady glanced at the manor not far away and sensed that the traitorous Star Advent had gone to the second floor of the manor. It seemed to be a piano room? Han Jiangxue raised her naturally hanging hand slightly and activated the King Broken Ring. All of a sudden, The small white and black gravel formed a huge ring that enveloped the courtyard of the manor. The king's shattering hoop she used was horizontal, but in the next moment, a vertical king's shattering hoop formed a large arc and encircled the courtyard. Clearly, it was Catherine's king broken ring. The gravel inevitably rushed into the ground and stirred the stones and soil underground, finally forming a closed loop. In the piano room, Catherine slowly opened the cover of the piano keys, her palm stroking the black and white keys. There was no longer any calmness and elegance on her face. Instead, there was only mockery and a hint of pleasure. She was mocking the members of Star Conversion who were about to be teleported over. She was pleased with the members of Star Conversion who were about to die. As for those members of Planet Conversion who kicked her out of Planet Conversion and even wanted to use her corpse to apologize to the Prophet, at this moment, Catherine only wanted to tear their bodies into pieces. She wanted them to bear the terrible consequences of provoking her. I've served Star Conversion for decades, and I've been treated this way after losing a battle. Maybe you guys should have a taste of defeat too. At the thought that she was the one who caused the destruction of Star Conversion, Catherine's body couldn't help but tremble slightly. She sat on the chair, closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and tapped the keys with her fingers. The sound of the piano drifted out of the building, and it was very clear under the breeze. The 7 dwarven musicians, who were at a loss, seemed to have found their backbone. Following the notes of their master, they automatically joined the performance. All of a sudden, Fu Hei had a strange expression on his face. After listening for a while, he turned around and looked at Shadow Crow who was guarding him. This song seems a little sinister. Shadow Crow said with a solemn expression, "It's not a good thing to have a strong perception. It's clearly far away, but it feels like it's right next to my ear." "Shut up," Second Last said in a hoarse voice. She turned to look at the blind lady and said, "Stay here, don't let anyone break out of the encirclement around you." The blind lady's expression was hidden behind the mask, and she stared at Second Last with a pair of ink-filled eyes. "You're not my captain." Second Last stared straight into the blind lady's eyes and said, "Now, I am." The blind lady stared at Second Last silently, seemingly having an invisible confrontation. A few seconds later, the blind lady turned around and lowered her eyes. Second Last put together a giant sword and strode forward to stand in the middle of the courtyard. She then closed her eyes and watched everything that happened in front of Jiang Zhao's eyes. The existence of the whale connected Jiang Zhao, Second Last, and the blind lady so that the two captains could see Jiang Zhao's actions in real time. At this moment, Jiang Zhao appeared directly in the Shrine of the Gods in the underwater ruins. All of a sudden, the chilly seawater made Jiang Zhao shiver. The massive palace was not built according to the specifications of humans at all. Jiang Zhao could clearly feel how insignificant he was here. In the Pantheon Divine Hall, there were 6 statues placed in the hollowed-out walls. They were like colossal gods for people to revere. Many years later, he returned to the underwater ruins. No, to be exact, he returned to the original underwater ruins many years later. Jiang Zhao was filled with astonishment. He could tell that the Star Organization was really pious. The statues should have been blurry because they had been soaked in seawater all year round, but at this moment, the lines of the statues were extremely clear. The 6 statues of men and women who were at the level of the gods of war were majestic and lifelike. The weapons and shields in their hands, as well as the armor on their bodies, made them feel extremely oppressive. Those people should be Hopkins's teammates back then. However, Jiang Zhao had never seen them before, and he wondered if the kings who conquered the European continent had already died of old age. In the main seat of the Shrine of the Gods of the Sea, there was a statue of a younger version of Hopkins, who was wearing a cloak and holding a book in his hands, carefully reading something. There were 9 devout believers in black cloaks kneeling in front of the statue of the young man in the cloak. They were initially lowering their heads and praying on the ground, but the moment Jiang Shao appeared, almost everyone looked at him. There were also cracks on the safety buckle in front of Jiang Zhao's chest. When everyone saw Jiang Zhao's face clearly, they were instantly dumbfounded. Jiang Shao didn't care if you were on a pilgrimage. He immediately connected everyone and flashed. Phew! At the next moment, Jiang Shao appeared behind second last. The members of the Star Organization were all horrified. Logically speaking, the contestants in the starry stage should have the demeanor of a great general, but everything happened too suddenly. Jiang Zhao's actions had already exceeded their scope of understanding. He suddenly flashed into the shrine of the gods? Okay, I'll just pretend that this guy has been here before and knows the specific environment of this place. However, how did Jiang Shao teleport everyone out of the Shrine of the Gods of the Sea where spatial star techniques were prohibited? Besides, Jiang Zhao's teleportation was not really teleportation, and the members of the Star Organization did not see the so-called shaking before casting at all. This is teleportation, isn't it? But how can he teleport 9 people out at the same time? Are you kidding me? Due to the fact that everything happened too suddenly, the believers did not change their posture of kneeling and praying. All of a sudden, in the courtyard of the Black and White Manor, there were 9 members of the Star Organization who were kneeling in front of second last, all looking up at her. The middle-aged man who was kneeling in front of second last subconsciously flashed, but he was stopped from doing so. He was very familiar with the star technique that prohibited space, and was already mentally prepared. Hence, he did not delay and hurriedly got up in an attempt to retreat. However, second last's speed was insanely fast. She abruptly raised her long leg and stomped on the man's shoulder, forcing his body, which was trying to stand up and retreat, to kneel down once again. The diamond sea-devouring soul floating on the man's body could not stop second last's terrifying power. You! A shocked and furious voice sounded from the back of the Star Organization's camp. Second last's movements were extremely fluid, and everything happened before the other party finished speaking. The giant sword in her hand suddenly pierced the man's Adam's apple from top to bottom and penetrated his entire body diagonally, stabbing deep into the ground. The man who was kneeling on the ground and praying was nailed to the ground. Second last stared at the dozen people who were retreating in a hurry with her long and narrow eyes that were filled with murderous intent. Her voice was hoarse and accompanied by the soul-stirring piano sound in the building. She said softly, "China tail feather." Jiang Shao, who was wearing a black cloak, floated above second last and put together a giant sword that was surrounded by blood mist. He moved his body horizontally and revealed half of his body and face. China Star Advent. Seeking monthly votes. Chapter 1203. Han Jiangxue was wearing a flame shield and holding a dark blue scepter in her hand, which she raised high. Crack! A thick bolt of lightning struck down and struck a female washing member. The violent electric current poured down and spread around the female washing's body. It was densely packed like a crazily slithering snake. At the same time, Baze, who was hiding at the edge of the sea cliff, also had electric currents flickering in his eyes, and a thick purple electric current poured down. Fu Hei and Yi Qingchen both cast the sound of silence and remained silent, regardless of whether Jiang Shao and second last were in the middle of the courtyard. It was because second last and Jiang Shao were both protected by the peace buckle Gu Shi and did not hesitate either. He immediately picked up the hammer of illusion and hung it high in the sky before bombarding the courtyard below. At this moment, his fall of the gods was already of the star quality. The dense shadows of the hammer seemed to have dragged the entire battlefield into the battle of the gods in the mythical stories. All of a sudden, the mountains collapsed and the earth shook, at the instant that the battle broke out, in the piano room on the second floor of the Black and White Manor. Catherine's fingers were tapping on the black and white piano keys softly and heavily. The rumbling sounds coming from outside the window made her smile, as if she was venting her anger. However, at the next moment, the smile on her face froze. All of a sudden, a star power text appeared in front of her. Continue. The mysterious and strange star power text was icy blue in color and floated in front of Catherine's eyes like a bullet screen. The notes that Catherine pressed were a little messy, but with her superb skills and muscle memory, Catherine's playing quickly returned to normal. An old man quietly appeared beside the piano. He had his head lowered and was looking at Catherine with a loving expression. Kathleen raised her head in a daze. Her hands did not dare to slow down at all. She continued to play according to the orders conveyed by the star power characters. However, she saw the prophet walking slowly to the window and looking down at the courtyard in the distance. As Hopkins looked at it, a smile appeared on his wrinkled old face. Hopkins murmured to himself, "It's already a prototype of my team from decades ago." In his line of sight, a white-robed woman with a hoop mask on her face stretched out her hand, manipulating an ink flower to bloom in front of the enemy's chest. The blind lady seemed to sense something extraordinary. She suddenly turned her head and looked at the manor in the distance. She just happened to see an old man standing in front of the window, looking at her from afar. The blind lady was shocked. She knew what Jiang Shao had experienced. So, could the old man in her sight be the so-called Hopkins? Without hesitation, the blind lady raised one hand and aimed at Hopkins. Whoosh! A black flower bloomed on Hopkins's chest. It had a pitch-black luster and an ink-like texture, strange yet exquisite. Just as the blind lady was about to take action, Hopkins lowered his head and looked at the quietly blooming flower on his chest. Blind lady's breathing froze for a moment. He lowered his head? How could he lower his head? I clearly deprived him of control of his body. At the next moment, Hopkins stretched out his hand and plucked the ink flower off his chest. The ink stained his old palm and dripped from between his fingers. He lowered his head slightly and sniffed the black ink flower. There was no refreshing fragrance, only a huge amount of astral power, as well as a wonderful feeling of being able to control everything in the world. What an ink flower! Hopkins sighed in admiration, picked up the flower, and nodded at the blind lady from afar. His smile was so amiable that he seemed like a harmless old man. However, his behavior had already made the blind lady doubt her life. She finally knew why Jiang Zhao's silence and blessing were ineffective on the old man. However, at the end of the day, that was just the control at the level of star technique. The ink flower was the second advancement of the blind lady. No one in this world should act so elegantly and indifferently in the face of this level of star transformation martial art. There were many people with strong senses on the field, and most of them immediately discovered the old man who was watching the battle from the window. Among them, the members of the star conversion team were overjoyed. As devout believers, when they saw the arrival of the Lord, it was needless to say, for it was the greatest encouragement for them. Encouragement was one thing, but recognition was another. All of a sudden, the members of the star conversion team seemed to have been injected with adrenaline and no longer cared about anything else. Jiang Shao followed Jiang Kelly's senses and saw Hopkins at the window too. With a sullen expression, he hollered, "Don't bother about him. The goal is to turn into a star." Hee. Hopkins shook his head and smiled. His old voice sounded in Catherine's ears. "Why did you choose this song?" His words caused Catherine's body to tremble. She widened her eyes and lowered her head. As she played, she said in a trembling voice, Sir, do you want to hear?" "No, this song sounds interesting." "It's a little like medieval Lancy," Hopkins said softly and squinted his eyes. On the battlefield below, a figure flashed and the long sword in his hand was aimed at Jiang Zhao's face. Screech! A tall figure stood in front of Jiang Shao. She was so fast that it made one's hair stand on end. She suddenly stretched out her palm. That steel-like palm actually forcibly grabbed the long sword that was crawling with electric currents, and directly pressed the figure that was shuttling at high speed to the ground. In an instant, Second Last's body was filled with electric currents and she felt numb all over. Bang! Ichinchin immediately used the sound of silence to suppress the Star Warrior, who was holding the Sword of Thunder and was covered in electric currents. On the other hand, Jiang Shao didn't hesitate at all. He swung his right hand and the blood-red giant sword flew out while spinning rapidly. Screech! The blade penetrated the flesh. The thick and sharp giant sword pierced through the man's head, and the tearing effect and bleeding effect coexisted. All of a sudden, the man's head was torn apart and blood splattered everywhere. Second Last's face was splattered with blood, and she shook her numb palm before rubbing her face with the back of her hand. She then turned around to look at the manor, only to see that Hopkins was nodding at her with a hint of admiration in his eyes. Second Last squinted slightly. Previously, she had heard from Jiang Shao about the existence of such a mysterious Star Warrior, and now she finally saw it with her own eyes. Second Last! Jiang Shao frantically stepped forward and pressed his hand on Second Last's shoulder. Carry out the mission! Second Last turned to look at Jiang Shao expressionlessly, her face covered in blood. Jiang Shao shook his head and tightened his grip on Second Last's hand. He was the deputy commander of Wei Feather and the leader of the Star Advent. He could command everyone present except for Second Last. Jiang Shao never expected that he would look at Second Last with such a pleading gaze. At this moment, Second Last's heart softened. She had never thought that she would see such emotions in Jiang Zhao's eyes one day. Interesting book pavilion. At the next moment, they shrieked. On the battlefield, the situation was ever-changing. If they had relied on others to remind them, Jiang Shao and Second Last would have already died 10,000 times. Jiang Shao, who had activated countless fields of vision, was simply like a central monitoring room. In fact, he could see everything without the need for perception. As soon as the shrieks sounded, the enemy had already arrived. The same electric current filled the air, the same longsword, and the same figure shuttling rapidly. However, his gaze was even more menacing. The golden-haired man did not think that he would follow in the footsteps of his comrades. The teammate whose head was pierced by the giant sword just now did not have any defensive star techniques, but he was different. He would definitely not be pierced by the blood sword because he was absolutely confident. How dare you get distracted on the battlefield? You even dare to communicate silently? Are you courting death? Who would miss such an opportunity? However, the golden-haired man did not think that perhaps it was a trap. It was because of Jiang Shao, whose every move and word were all fake. Second Last suddenly raised her hand to block, but Jiang Shao flashed away quickly with her. The two of them were like a television with poor reception as they flickered on the spot. Two sharp withering arrows penetrated Jiang Zhao's body from behind and emerged from his chest. The man's pupils constricted slightly. Jiang Shao could really flash in the Double King crushing rings. Just like when he was at the bottom of the sea previously. With, what? Really? Ding! The blood-colored giant sword moved from the bottom to the top and blocked the Thunderbolt sword. The Star Conversion members immediately opened up and the two withering arrows that penetrated Jiang Zhao's chest were nailed into the man's chest. Ah! The man was horrified and he couldn't help but shriek in pain. The powerful defense that he was once proud of was not worth mentioning in the face of the withering arrows. Jiang Shao and Second Last did not even chase after him. Instead, they stared at the man who was on the verge of going crazy. He had been turning on the purification electric current, but it didn't help. In a panic, he slapped his chest with both hands, only to realize that he couldn't get rid of the withering effect. Instead, his body was getting more and more tattered. Hopkins glanced at the cliff thoughtfully and glanced at Ho Mingming, who was smirking coldly, and Jiang Gong, who had a solemn expression. Hopkins shook his head silently. It seemed that he was choosing something. The golden-haired man who had been withering hurriedly stopped and grabbed his blonde hair with both hands at a loss. He yelled, "Heal, I need to be healed. I need to be healed." However, all he could see was the battlefield. He frantically searched for the medical star warrior, only to see another medical warrior whose body was also withering and tattered, as well as another medical warrior who had been smashed by a great sage. "Sir! Sir! Help me!" Seeing that only 2 medical warriors had died among the 9 of them, the man endured the pain of having half of his body withered and turned to look at the black and white manor. "Save me!" the man yelled maniacally while his body was filled with electric currents. He then rushed towards the black and white manor. Bang! With a loud bang, the figure that was shuttling at high speed was intercepted in mid-air and slammed into the lawn by a large sword. Xia Yan blocked the man's last chance of survival and seemed to be standing on the boundary between life and death. "I'll help you," Xia Yan said through gritted teeth with a menacing gaze. She slashed her sword down again, and a small hidden dragon that was 8 meters long darted out and darted into the ground. Boom! The small hidden dragon bared its fangs and brandished its claws before roaring and descending from the sky. The man's body, which was already in tatters, was actually smashed in half. The upper half of his body was smashed and most of it disappeared, leaving the lower half of his body, which had strong defense and had yet to wither, alone in the pit. Hopkins' eyes lit up and he looked at Xia Yan, who was wearing a cloak and floating in midair, and couldn't help but smile warmly. His turbid eyes were filled with a trace of nostalgia. It seemed that Xia Yan's valiant figure reminded him of someone. Chapter 1204. Xia Yan turned around and glanced at Hopkins from the corner of her eye. Hopkins also snapped out of his reverie and nodded at Xia Yan with a smile. Xia Yan immediately turned around and did not want to look at him anymore. She did not like strangers looking at her like that. In the distance, a hysterical shriek sounded. "I want you to know who you've provoked." On the west side of the courtyard, a female star warrior was surrounded by water droplets. Clearly, she was in a state of purification. As she raised her hands, a wave surged up from the cliff. Ho Mingming and Jiang Gong turned their heads abruptly, only to see the huge wave that had suddenly taken shape like a tsunami. As the members of the organization died one by one, the situation could no longer be reversed. Hence, the female star warrior couldn't care less about her teammates anymore. Monstrous waves came crashing down. The seawater was mixed with strong astral power and crashed down. Beside the cliff, Ho Mingming, Jiang Gong, and Baze fled in panic and immediately flashed away. As the raging waves rose, cherry blossoms began to scatter on the field. Martha's body suddenly turned into a water droplet that slapped on the lawn beneath her feet. Buzz! Buzz! The waves surged up the cliff and rushed towards the battlefield. However, at the instant that the seawater swept past female star, 2 whale-like sounds could be heard. The originally unstoppable and indomitable giant wave suddenly changed its shape. It turned from a tsunami into a spinning whirlpool. The huge whirlpool spun rapidly and drowned female star warrior's body, trapping her within. At this moment, the battlefield fell silent. Little Chongyang was riding charcoal and pointing his halberd at the shield of the star warrior in front of him. The star warrior seemed to be shocked by the scene too. What kind of strength would one have to possess to forcibly strip someone's star technique and turn it into their own? In the sky, the 2 large fishes that were swimming slowly gave everyone the answer. Boom! The rapidly spinning whirlpool suddenly shattered, and countless water droplets poured in all directions. The battlefield became silent. At the center of the whirlpool, cherry blossoms were falling down. Jiang Kelly grabbed Nu Huaxing's long hair and pulled it back, forcing her to face the sky. The exquisite butterfly knife in Jiang Kelly's hand pierced through the woman's throat. In front of the woman, Marta held the combat knife in a reverse grip and stabbed it into her heart. The smiles on the faces of the two mechas were exactly the same, wanton and cruel. Who did he offend? We are here for the star conversion art. In fact, you have to ask yourself this question. You guys, who did you provoke? At this time, there were still 2 star conversion members on the battlefield who had not died, but among them, one of them had his head, arms, and legs tightly bound by 5 iron chains, firmly imprisoned in the air. He was enduring the judgment of the fall of the gods, and his body was smashed to pieces and riddled with holes. As for the other star conversion member, the ink flower blooming in front of his chest has already soaked his whole body. He is like a sculpture made of ink, incomparably black, but also glowing with a strange luster, as if a light touch would shatter it. Pa, pa, pa. In the manner, surrounded by the slightly evil sound of the piano, the sound of hands clapping could be heard. Blind Lady's figure turned into a ball of ink, and she stood up from behind the ink sculpture. Without hesitation, she inserted one hand into the back of the ink sculpture, and her cold jade-like hand suddenly clenched tightly, crushing the heart of the star conversion member. Crack, crack. The ink sculpture in front of Blind Lady suddenly shattered. Blind Lady's figure, which was blocked by the sculpture, was also revealed. Behind the circle mask, a pair of black ink eyes looked at the second floor of the manor, at the old man in front of the window. Jiang Shao looked at the corpse in front of Blind Lady, and also looked at the scattered corpses in the courtyard, but he shook his head and smiled. Thinking back to those years, you almost defeated me. Only now did I realize that most of them were good. Hopkins looked at Jiang Shao and said, "What a wonderful ambush." Jiang Shao waved his hand and said, "You flatter me." As soon as he said this, Wei Feather, Xing Lin, and the others were a little confused. The relationship between Jiang Shao and Hopkins seemed to be far more complicated than they had imagined. There was no tension or depression, nor was there a fight to the death. It was more like 2 friends chatting in private. And the older friend even had a trace of admiration for the younger friend. Hopkins said, "It seems that I have underestimated you. Star conversion does not pose any challenge to you." Jiang Shao responded, "They were just born a few decades earlier than me, and started earlier than me. You also told me that some of the rules of this world are not rules at all for you and me." Hopkins touched his chin, as if he was thinking about something seriously. He said, "In star conversion, there is still a team of 4 people. That is their core leader team, and they are quite strong. Maybe you should be more humble and really destroy star conversion before you come to a conclusion." Jiang Shao did not respond, and he did not comment. He could just ambush them again. There was no reason for him to lose. This time, Wei Feather and Xing Lin's ambush caught the other party off guard. On the battlefield, a little advantage could be turned into victory and determine life and death. When the devout believers were teleported here from the state of pilgrimage, the formation of Wei Feather and Xing Lin had already been spread out, and the tactics had already been formulated. Each team was like a precision operating instrument, highly educated, and performing their respective duties. However, in the end, it was still a matter of strength. At this time, Wei Feather and Xing Lin were no longer what they used to be. The strength of the 2 teams should surpass star conversion in all aspects. Lord, times have changed. You used to have strong ships and cannons, and bullied me with bare hands. But now, you have an upgraded version of strong ships and cannons, and I have already driven out an aircraft carrier. What is the quality of Xing Lin and Wei Feather? Look at the members of Star Conversion. They fight on their own. Maybe the 9 people on the pilgrimage were too oppressed by Xing Lin and Wei Feather. They blindly wanted to perform in front of the Lord and please Hopkins. The individual heroism in everyone's hearts was too strong, which led to the situation of scattered sand. When faced with groups of star beasts and star warriors at the star sea level, the star conversion members might still be able to dominate the battlefield with their own strength, but when faced with teams of the same level or higher, what could they use to turn the tide? Their lives? Well, indeed, they were already dead. Second Last had once warned Jiang Xiao throughout his career, but the people who fulfilled her warning were always Jiang Xiao's enemies. Being arrogant will cost you your life. Due to various factors, there might be a brief exchange of blows in the ambush, but in the end it would definitely be one-sided. There was no reason for Jiang Xiao to lose. Hopkins asked, "Do you plan to meet the core team of leaders?" Jiang Xiao didn't answer and instead asked, "What are you doing here?" Hopkins nodded and said, "To see how you've grown recently. It seems that you've been studying and immersing yourself in the human body modification page in Star Warriors for a long time." Hopkins then glanced at the blind lady before glancing at Second Last with obvious intentions. The way they communicated once again confirmed the thoughts of everyone present. It was not a tit-for-tat between sworn enemies, but more like a greeting and concern between friends. In the piano room, Catherine, who was playing the piano carefully, finally believed what Jiang Xiao had said to her previously. "I'm not his believer, but his partner." Jiang Xiao said impatiently, "I haven't figured it out yet. Don't rush me." Hopkins had a peculiar expression on his face, and he suddenly felt like he was looking at a child who was acting shamelessly. Then, an even weirder smile appeared on his weird expression. Hopkins looked at the blind lady, then at Second Last, and then at Xia Yan, Han Jiangxue, and Gu Shi and Hey, old man, what are you up to now? Jiang Zhao's heart sank as he felt that the old man's gaze was deep and meaningful. Hopkins looked around and finally fixed his eyes on the outstanding great saint. The great sage picked up his rod and his body tensed up as he kept his guard up. No one knew what Hopkins was thinking. Finally, he said, "Your teammates are not bad." Jiang Xiao asked, "Huh? What do you want to do?" Hopkins shrugged and said, "Maybe you can transform the city I abandoned and carve your sculptures on the Temple of the Gods. You can then put them on Earth to be admired and let the world see your achievements. After all, you're still at the stage of caring, aren't you? Good luck, my friend. I look forward to the day when we meet again." With that, Hopkins turned around and walked to Catherine, who was playing the piano. Catherine couldn't help but tremble. She lowered her head and stared at the black and white piano keys, not daring to breathe heavily. Hopkins pressed his hand on Catherine's head and said softly, "Child, betrayal is not allowed." As he spoke, Hopkins's figure flickered and disappeared, and the music stopped abruptly. Because Catherine was also taken away by Hopkins. In the courtyard, everyone looked at each other. Although they couldn't see what happened in the piano room on the second floor, they could sense that it was already empty. Crack! The only remaining Star Knight dropped the shield and lance in his hands, and the undead fire horse he was riding shattered into a pile of star power. Little Chongyang blinked and looked at the Star Warrior, who had suddenly given up resisting and raised his hands to surrender. He didn't know what to do. "I'm pointing a gun at you. Why are you throwing away your armor?" Little Chongyang poked the Star Knight's face with the tip of the heavenly halberd and hollered, "Don't surrender! I haven't had enough yet. Everyone else has already killed. I'm the only one left. Hurry and pick up your shield." The Star Knight was speechless. He endured little Chongyang's teasing and lowered his head, seemingly resigned to his fate and not resisting at all. It seemed that he still had hope in his heart and the wonderful fantasy that the other party would not kill the prisoners of war. Jiang Xiao hurriedly flashed and stood at the spot where Hopkins used to be. He then looked into the house, but it was already empty. In the courtyard of the manor, Second Last pondered for a moment and gestured at the tall and handsome Star Knight in the distance. "You, come here." The Star Knight's expression changed, and he heard Second Last's hoarse voice again. "Pass. Come." The Star Knight hesitated for a moment and shivered in fear. He then walked towards second last while suppressing his fear. She waved her hand and opened the space door of the Calamity's shadow before tilting her head. The Star Knight heaved a sigh of relief and strode towards the space door. Second last's cold and hoarse voice sounded beside him. You will tell me everything about the Star Knight. If there's any falsehood, I'll make you wish you were dead. The Star Knight's face stiffened and he hurriedly walked into the Calamity's shadow ruins. Second last also closed the door and flashed into the manor before standing beside Jiang Shao. She looked around and asked in a deep voice, "Where did he go?" Jiang Shao shook his head. "I heard him say something before he left." The blind lady stood up shakily from the ground beside her. "What did he say?" Jiang Shao frantically looked at the blind lady. The blind lady said, "Betrayal is not allowed." Jiang Shao asked, "Then, he left with Catherine?" "Yes," the blind lady answered calmly. Jiang Shao scratched his head and thought, "Did that old man bring Catherine back to kill her? Damn it! You snatched my mecha. When Catherine went to your house to apologize to you, you ignored her. Now that she's following me and is about to become my mecha, you're here to take her away? This old fellow, you don't want anyone else, and you snatch her away too. Why are you acting like a child snatching a toy?" The blind lady asked, "What's your relationship like?" Jiang Shao pursed his lips and said, "It's another form of cooperation. He's working hard to train me." "Well, forget it. Let's ignore him for now. Let's get down to business." In fact, Jiang Shao had some doubts too. If Hopkins wanted Jiang Shao to grow faster, Jiang Zhao's teammates seemed to have helped him a lot. However, Hopkins still left the members of the Star Arrival team and the Tail Feather team there. Is this considered Hopkins's way of expressing goodwill? Just like how he didn't stop Jiang Shao from carrying out the mission? Or does this old man have some ulterior motives? Second last pondered for a moment and said, "Now that our team has gotten into formation, it's time to go all out." "Okay." Jiang Shao glanced at the seat where Catherine used to sit and got rid of the messy thoughts in his head. He then turned around and said, "I'll go to the bottom of the sea again and look for the other members of the Star Conversion team." Second last said, "Let's go together. You just teleported a total of 9 people here. It's impossible that the Star Conversion team didn't notice. They're probably waiting for you to go." Jiang Shao humphed and said, "That's the problem. They know that I'm going, but they can't stop me. They might even know that I'm going to bring people back, but they can't stop me. They can't do anything about it. That's a very painful thing for the Star Conversion team, isn't it?" Upon hearing this, second last smirked, "Return evil for evil, and do good for good. Life would be much smoother and more enjoyable if that was ingrained in one's bones." She nodded slightly and said, "I'll go with you. If they're still in the undersea castle, they'll definitely be on guard." Jiang Shao wanted to say something, but second last pressed her hand on his shoulder. She lowered her head and looked at Jiang Shao with a serious expression before saying, "No matter what I encounter, I'll be at ease as long as you're with me. Thank you for the 70,000 yuan reward from Emperor Yen. Boss, you're so generous. Thank you for your support." Chapter 1205. After Jiang Shao and second last put on the peace pendant, they asked the team to continue guarding the place and quickly headed to the underwater city. This time, Jiang Shao still entered the Pantheon and thought that he would encounter the Star Conversion members who were waiting for him. However, he discovered that there was no one in the Pantheon. Second last had the amphibious sea demon star technique, which was no different from being on land. There was a saying that went, "Like a fish in water." Second last was dressed in a black Guardians of the Night uniform and swimming in the seawater. Jiang Shao was envious of her beautiful body lines. She was not really swimming, but it was just a habit that she couldn't get rid of for the time being. In fact, the star technique amphibious sea demon star technique was enough to allow star warriors to move left and right freely in the water as if they were flying in the air. They didn't need to paddle at all. She was beautiful and could do whatever she wanted. However, Jiang Shao was wearing the burning sea-devouring robe and could only use the sea-devouring robe to determine Jiang Zhao's intentions. In the eyes of outsiders, Jiang Shao was also a flying fish, but Jiang Shao knew very well that he was just a dead fish and his actual body was actually a cloak. Once the cloak was gone, he would be crushed by the seawater in the deep sea. Second Last immediately activated the Diamond Sea Demon's purification, which was a purification star technique that covered her body in the form of water droplets. However, it was colorless and invisible in the deep sea. Not only was the purification sea demon's purification colorless and invisible, but her concealment and perception type Diamond Sea Demon's fog were also invisible in the deep sea. Hence, although she didn't seem to have done anything, Second Last was actually surrounded by star techniques at this moment. Second Last looked up and saw the large stone sculptures of the gods at the bottom of the sea. There were a total of 7 stone sculptures that were extremely exquisite and extraordinary. Judging from the clothes, weapons, and body shape of each sculpture, the profession of the Star Warriors could be seen. "You've been here before," Second Last said. "Gulp, gulp, gulp." Jiang Shao responded, but when he was about to speak, he spat out a string of bubbles. Second Last turned to look at Jiang Shao, only to see a helpless expression on his face. She couldn't help but reveal a smile on her expressionless face. She smiled faintly, but Jiang Shao noticed it. Jiang Shao was displeased and spat at Second Last. Gulp, gulp. It appeared. Jiang Shao used a bubble ray on Second Last. A series of bubbles landed on Second Last's palm. She covered her face with one hand and moved her palm away. She said, "Stop playing. Carry out the mission." Jiang Shao was infuriated. "This is bullying." Second Last swam past Jiang Shao and seemed to have gradually adapted to the environment. Her hands were no longer paddling, but her body and legs still had some residual swimming habit. They swayed up and down like a fishtail, very much like the leg movements of a butterfly stroke, and quickly swam out. Jiang Shao hurriedly followed. The 2 tiny humans swam past the magnificent temple of the gods and out of the huge stone door. The City of Hope had been renovated. There were sea soul lamps everywhere, almost lighting up the entire underwater city. However, most of these sea soul lamps were not floating alone in the deep sea. As one of the 3 parts of the sea soul set, they were mostly carried by the sea soul fish demon. As soon as Jiang Shao and Second Last swam out of the shrine, they saw a handsome fish demon holding a sea soul lamp who was pacing back and forth in front of the shrine. Upon sight of Jiang Shao and Second Last, the sea soul fish demon couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. They were more than 3 meters long and their upper bodies were no different from humans. However, there was a beautiful fishtail at the waist. In the eyes of humans, the sea soul fish demon was too handsome, enough to make humans ashamed of themselves. Besides, the biggest problem was that these handsome fish demons were naturally promiscuous. Second Last squinted slightly with a hint of murderous intent in her eyes, but the sea soul fish demon seemed to be unable to feel it. He swam towards Second Last with the sea soul lamp in his hand. As the sea soul lamps on the sea soul fish demon's face opened up, 2 waves formed on the side of the demon's face, revealing the true appearance of the demon. Second Last finally saw what it meant to be handsome. Logically speaking, any one of them from this race would be able to debut and become an idol. The demon stretched out his fair palm towards Second Last. His movements were very gentle and his gaze was very gentle. Any girl would have been mesmerized by him, right? This expression, this gaze. Oh my God, wasn't this the prince who only appeared in their dreams? Wasn't he the prince whose eyes were filled with themselves? The demon held on to Second Last's hand with a charming smile while his golden curly hair fluttered in the seawater. The sea soul fish demon then slowly lowered his head and placed his palm on the back of second last's hand. Jiang Shao was dumbfounded. Am I them I? 3, 2, 1. Let's go. He was looking forward to a stroke of luck and an impact. Second last held onto the sea soul fish demon's hand and said, "Open the door." The sea soul fish demon looked at second last with a smile. Although it didn't understand what she was talking about, it was willing to pretend to listen. The characteristics of the sea soul fish demon made it know how to be an excellent partner. Before getting the opposite sex, the sea soul fish demon was a perfect existence. After getting the opposite sex, cheating, abandoning, and falling in love with someone else were inevitable. It was innate and engraved in their genes. The European nobles who reared the sea soul fish demons, especially the female nobles, were well aware of the consequences of mermaid love. Having lived in Hoppa City for a long time, the sea soul fish demon had seen some humans, but it had never seen such an elegant woman. However, the sea soul fish demon thought that it had abducted a goddess. It didn't know that cats ate fish. Jiang Shao immediately opened the space door and second last grabbed the sea soul fish demon's hand tightly before throwing it into the space door. The sea soul fish demon was dumbfounded. Whoosh, there was a surge of waves and bubbles, and the huge sea soul fish demon was still immersed in the joy of hunting a second ago. However, in the next second, it was slapped into Jiang Zhao's space by the big cat. Jiang Shao immediately closed the space door and quickly swam towards second last. He then grabbed her hand and rubbed it repeatedly. He didn't seem to be helping her wash her hands, but rather giving her a scrub bath. Jiang Shao muttered, "Do you know how many women it has touched with that hand? It's so dirty." Just as the words were about to come out of his mouth, a series of bubbles came out. Gurgle, gurgle. Second last floated in the sea and looked down at Jiang Shao washing her hands. She didn't break free and simply said, "Someone's here." Jiang Shao hurriedly turned around and vaguely sensed that there were two huge and blurry figures swimming towards him. Second last stood in front of Jiang Shao and said, "It's not a human, it's a star beast. There doesn't seem to be anyone here. I didn't find any humans." Second last's perception was extremely strong, and the range of the serene mist that she had activated was extremely large. Hence, her perception covered a rather large area. If she said that there was no one around, the ruins at the bottom of the sea would probably be deserted. A few seconds later, Jiang Shao finally saw two female giants with long brown curly hair. Damn, they're probably 6 or 7 meters long. They're about the same size as the king and queen in the dimensional space on the chessboard. Apart from the fact that their height did not meet the standards of humans, everything else about them was no different from humans. Besides, they were a perfect match. They each held a ball of light in their left and right hand. Their bodies and arms were also wrapped in half illusory, half physical chains. Andromeda? Of course, they were also the chained resentful spirits that the Chinese people referred to. They weren't wearing any clothes, but the chains wrapped around their bodies covered their important parts very well. The problem was that the chains wrapped around their bodies were semi-illusory. Although the layers of chains covered their important parts and made it impossible for others to see them clearly, they were not wearing proper clothes, after all. So, hence, in Jiang Zhao's opinion, it was just an artificial embellishment. Jiang Shao couldn't help but humph and think, what a bunch of naughty sisters. Alright, although you're hiding in the deep sea and no one can see you, you at least know how to be embarrassed. That's rare. Andromeda, me? I have to praise you guys. I risked my life to come here and you guys aren't giving me any benefits at all? Is this what humans should do? But then again, why don't the sea soul fish demons flirt with you guys? Is it because of the huge difference in size? Or are you guys too resentful? The two Andromedas stared at Jiang Shao and second last with resentment in their eyes. There seemed to be endless resentment between their eyebrows. Their gazes also landed on Jiang Shao and Second Last's hands, and all of a sudden, the resentment on their faces turned into jealousy. Sure enough, when a dog dies, no couple is innocent. The two chained resentful spirits raised their right hands and summoned several semi-illusory chains that surged towards Second Last. Jiang Shao raised his hand abruptly and two space doors were opened in front of the chained resentful spirits 20 meters away. Just now, the space door that Jiang Shao opened was also at the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean, so the water pressure was the same. Second Last had to throw the sea soul fish demons in. However, this time, the space door that Jiang Shao opened in front of the two chained resentful spirits led to the surface of the Arctic Ocean. So, before the two chained resentful spirits could do anything, they were blasted into the Arctic Ocean by the water cannon. Second Last raised her eyebrows slightly and turned to look at Jiang Shao. Jiang Shao scratched his head and chuckled. "This is rather impressive, isn't it?" Second Last lowered her eyes and looked at his hand that was still holding hers. Jiang Shao did not panic at all and continued to rub Second Last's hand maniacally. He was determined to rub off a layer of skin. Second Last's eyes narrowed, and she waved her hand abruptly. "Mission? There's no one here. What mission?" Jiang Shao pursed his lips and spat out a string of bubbles before chasing after Second Last. However, this time, Jiang Shao seemed to have incurred the wrath of the crowd. Just now, the screams of the two chained resentful spirits spread far and wide, attracting countless sea soul fish demons and chained resentful spirit. In just a few seconds, Jiang Shao and Second Last were surrounded by layers of enemies. The Andromeda was holding a glowing ball in her hand while the sea soul fish demon was holding a sea soul lamp. All of a sudden, Jiang Shao and Second Last were surrounded by star beasts from all directions. The scene was extremely spectacular. The deep sea, which was supposed to be dark, was lit up by the light source and trapped Jiang Shao and Second Last like a ball with unclear levels. At this moment, Second Last no longer knew where she should protect Jiang Shao. There were enemies everywhere and there was no safety to speak of. Jiang Shao looked at Second Last and said, "Gulp, gulp, gulp." Second Last asked, "Huh?" At the next moment, Jiang Shao opened his arms abruptly, as if he was hugging the sea. Then, the dense space portals opened in front of the chained resentful spirits and sea soul fish demons almost at the same time. In Jiang Zhao's world of calamity, heavy water cannons were shot from the surface of the Arctic Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. Andromeda was shot into the Arctic Ocean, while the sea soul fish demons were shot into the Atlantic Ocean. Compared to the previous scene of being surrounded, this scene was even more spectacular. A few seconds later, in the underwater city, Jiang Shao closed his eyes and lowered his head slightly. He slowly folded his arms and finally crossed his fingers before clenching them into fists and pressing them against the tip of his nose. The dense space portals in all directions disappeared one after another, and the underwater city was plunged into darkness. Only the sea-devouring robe that Jiang Shao was wearing was still burning with spiral-shaped flames, becoming the only source of light in the dark sea. Hearing others talk about it and witnessing it with one's own eyes were two completely different concepts. Second Last was fortunate enough to see a young man whose lifespan was shortened. She tried her best not to praise his understanding of star techniques, as well as his terrifying creativity and control. Staring at the little toxic healer who was praying with his eyes closed, Second Last reached out and patted his face gently. "That's enough. Gulp, gulp. Thank you, I'm the leader of the informants, for your reward. Boss, you're so generous. Thank you for your support. I wish you good health, peace, and happiness." Chapter 1206. Jiang Zhao's body was burning with the soul of the sea devourer, which was a source of light. Second Last had a strong sense of perception that allowed her to see her surroundings clearly even in the dark. The two of them swam out of the Pantheon and headed all the way to the east, where they saw the majestic arena. Compared to the Pantheon, the arena was more shocking to second last. It was very difficult for her to imagine what kind of ancient divine beasts would have been fighting to their heart's content here decades ago. In this huge arena, on that circle of high stands, it was as if she could still imagine the crowd jostling each other's shoulders, the noisy scene of the cauldron of voices. At the thought of this, second last turned to look at Jiang Shao. If he had been born a few decades ago and fought with Hopkins in the alien world, he would have loved the arena. Some people, such as second last, were soldiers before they became star warriors. On the other hand, some people were born to be the focus of attention and should shine in the arena with tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people. Clearly, Jiang Shao was such a person in second last's heart. If she hadn't forcefully taken him into her pocket and dragged him into her tail feathers, and if it weren't for the strange phenomenon of the fusion of Earth and the alien ball, he probably wouldn't have to put on a military uniform and live his life incognito. Gulp, gulp. Jiang Shao spat out some bubbles on second last's face, wondering why she was looking at him like that. Second last turned around and looked at the sea soul lamps floating above the arena, which looked just like the Kongming lanterns that were rising in the night sky on land. She opened her mouth and said, "Take them all." Gulp. Jiang Shao didn't mind having more sea soul lamps in his world. He quickly swam forward and opened a space door, after which he threw the sea soul lamps into the Calamity world. Jiang Shao deliberately left one behind and carried it with one hand. The two of them then swam from the arena to the huge palace on the cliff. Along the way, second last walked along the path that Jiang Shao had once walked on and saw the stone statue that stood proudly. Sea soul fish demon, centaur spirit. When she looked at the golden feathered walker, she couldn't help but turn to look at Jiang Shao in bewilderment. Jiang Shao nodded. Second last stared at the golden feathered walker sculpture and its spacious wings. She said, "These used to be Hopkins's subordinates, right?" Jiang Shao nodded again. Second last was secretly amazed and asked softly, "I initially thought that the golden feathered walkers were fabricated star beasts. Why did they go extinct? Were they exterminated by Hopkins because of the rebellion?" Jiang Shao opened his mouth, but he couldn't explain. He wanted to tell second last that he had seen the golden feathered walkers in Hopkins' Ocean Ridge world, but he had no idea why only the golden feathered walkers moved into Hopkins' Ocean Ridge world, while the centaur spirit and the sea soul fish demons did not. "Let's go." Jiang Shao grabbed second last's hand and dragged her away from the foot of the golden feathered walker before swimming towards the gate of the palace. However, such a scene gave Jiang Shao a sense of déjà vu. But last time, it was the second Princess Sophia who led him to the palace. This time, he became the tour guide and was holding on to his companion. Second last looked around. As an experienced and knowledgeable star warrior, there was hardly anything in this world that could please her. However, the trip to the bottom of the sea this time was an eye-opener for second last as she scanned her surroundings curiously. All of a sudden, second last tightened her grip and grabbed Jiang Shao, who was trying to push open the gate of the palace. Jiang Shao turned around in bewilderment, feeling rather puzzled. Second last looked solemn and mouthed, "There's someone here." Jiang Shao was dumbfounded. "There's someone here? Where? In the palace?" Second last frowned slightly, but she wasn't looking at the same level or up at the top of the palace. Instead, she was looking down at the ground. Second last stretched out her finger and pointed at her feet diagonally below before raising 4 fingers with her left hand. "There's someone diagonally below." 4. Jiang Zhao's mind raced. Just now, he sent 9 people to the Black and White Manor, and there were 4 here. According to the old demoness, Catherine, there were a total of 24 people in the Star Conversion Organization. If he killed the 4 of them, he would be able to kill half of the Star Conversion Organization members. Jiang Shao brought second last along with him and flashed to the center of the palace, where there was a stone statue in a cloak who was reading a book. He pointed at his feet with an inquisitive look on his face. Second last corrected the direction that Jiang Shao was pointing and moved his finger diagonally downward. Jiang Shao suddenly realized that the 4 members of the Star Conversion Organization were probably in the altar. He had once been to the altar with the Shima royal family, and had also seen the mural where Hopkins looked like a conman with his hands spread out and looking up at the sky. On the altar, the undersea giants were lining up to ascend, but Jiang Shao had no idea where they had gone. Jiang Shao was about to move, but he felt second last's grip on him again, making him feel pain. Jiang Shao looked at second last in bewilderment, only to hear her say, "Okay, they're here." Jiang Shao was dumbfounded. "What do you mean? Who is she talking to?" Clearly, second last had sensed the other party, and the other party had also sensed her. Second last paused for a moment and seemed to be listening to something. She then continued, "You're right, only one of us can survive. Kacha." As soon as second last said that, a crack appeared on the safety buckle in front of Jiang Zhao's chest. Jiang Zhao got a great shock and thought, "Go to hell. Do you really think I can't find you?" Without hesitation, he darted away with second last and even passed through the undersea forest to stand on the altar. In his line of sight, there were 4 figures with their backs facing him. They were kneeling in front of him and looking up at the stone painting on the wall, seemingly admiring the prophet's glorious achievements. Jiang Shao couldn't be bothered about that. On Earth, he thought that the Star Conversion Organization members were all very upright, but when he came to the alien planet, he realized that the Star Conversion Organization members were not only weak, but also weak. He had seen a total of 13 members of the Star Conversion Organization in the underwater city, but none of them were standing. At the next moment, Jiang Shao, second last, and the 4 cloaked members of the Star Conversion Organization were all teleported to the courtyard of the Black and White Manor. All of a sudden, Wei Yu and the Star Advent team immediately became vigilant and attacked without hesitation. Fu Hei and Yi Qingchen immediately waved their hands and were about to throw Sound of Silence. However, the only female member of the Star Conversion Organization suddenly covered her ears with her hands and shrieked, "Ah! Damn it!" Fu Hei's face stiffened and his hands stiffened. This. Yi Qingchen subconsciously took a step back and couldn't help but feel terrified. There seemed to be a voice in the depths of her heart that was constantly warning her, "Run! Run! Get out of here!" Diamond, Song of the Ocean Ridge. Yi Qingchen took a small step back, while the rest of Wei Yu and the Star Advent team retreated more or less. The worst ones, Shadow Crow and Little Chongyang, even turned around and ran. Martha stood behind the members of Wei Yu's team and said through gritted teeth, "Shut up!" Battle roar, clear head, sound of burning sea. Gu Shi and stood in front of Wei Yu's team and roared, "Ah!" Battle roar, clear head, roar. On the edge of the sea cliff, Jiang Kelly, the only melee member of the team, glared at the female member of the Star Conversion Organization with a sullen expression and hollered, "How dare you!" Battle roar, heart-calming, howl of the heavenly hound. In an instant, 3 battle roars came from 3 different positions and covered the entire area. Wei Yu and the Star Advent team immediately calmed down. In the camp of Wei Yu's team, Fu Hei no longer knew what he was really feeling. Should he be flustered, frightened, or calm and rational? However, no matter what, he finally raised his trembling hand and the star power in his body began to circulate as usual. Sound of Silence, come out. Immediately after Sound of Silence, a huge star power word appeared, down. In the camp of Wei Yu's team, Yi Qingchen also raised her hand along with Han Jiangshu. However, she did not choose Sound of Silence and instead chose Golden Blessing. A pillar of blessing that was full of holy light landed, but it was blocked by a shield that was surging with waves. Boom! 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 The huge star power word pressed down frantically, but it seemed to be unable to cause much damage to the dead person who was kneeling on the ground. More importantly, the silence effect of world peace had been completely purified. At the instant that the female member of the Star Conversion Organization covered her ears and screamed, water droplets were sprinkled around her, purifying all the polluted areas around her. "Jiang Xiaopi, it's an honor to meet you," said an elderly voice, and the man who was kneeling in the middle slowly stood up. Jiang Xiao squinted slightly and his expression was exactly the same as second last. He knew that the person who was talking to him was the well-deserved leader of the Star Organization, Hua Xing. Yes, the Star Conversion Organization was named after this old man. On Earth, no country had contestants in the Starry Sky stage. Back then, there were already rumors that Hua Xing and his wife, Elizabeth, were likely to be contestants in the Starry Sky stage. Beside Hua Xing, a white-haired old lady also stood up. She was Hua Xing's wife, Elizabeth. However, she didn't seem to think that it was a battle of life and death. She was very gentle and calm. Elizabeth reached into her arms and pulled out a roll of parchment that was wrapped in water from the sea-devouring soul cloak. Smiling, she nodded at Jiang Xiao and said, "Jiang Xiaopi." Second last raised her right hand and clenched it into a fist. All of a sudden, all the teams stopped moving. Elizabeth kicked the parchment back into her black cloak and said, "The prophet left us a map. Could be mine, or it could be yours." Elizabeth sighed softly and said, "The prophet said that it belongs to whoever survives." Jiang Xiao sneered and said, "You can keep it. I don't care." Elizabeth turned a deaf ear to Jiang Xiao's words. She lowered her head and gently rubbed the head of the woman kneeling beside her. "Child, remember this face." The woman, who was covering her ears and kneeling with her head lowered, finally raised her head and looked at Jiang Xiao, who was in the distance. She was probably in her mid-40s and her face was pale and her eyes were hollow. She looked just like a puppet. Even Jiang Xiao's mecha was brimming with energy and vigor, but this woman couldn't even compare to a puppet. Judging from her expression, she seemed to be in an extremely bad state of mind. Jiang Xiao did not doubt the medical abilities of Hua Xing's team. So, what exactly caused this woman to be in such a miserable state of mind? At the side, Hua Xing's leader, the old man codenamed Hua Xing, reached out and patted the man who was kneeling on the ground and holding a seawater shield. The man slowly stood up and stared at Jiang Xiao without saying a word. Hua Xing looked past the face of the shield warrior and looked at Jiang Xiao. "Everything will end today." Jiang Xiao grinned. "No, Hua Xing, it's not over yet. After you die, there are still 11 Hua Xing. I will hunt them down one by one." Hua Xing smiled and reached out to stroke his wet white hair. He then looked around and said, "No, Jiang Xiaopi, everything will end today. Your life, the lives of your comrades, and my mission. Today, everything will end." While speaking, a star map lit up in front of Hua Xing's chest. It was a lifelike image of a man. In the next moment, the blue body spread out and merged with Hua Xing's body. In the short span of 3 seconds, the gray-bearded old thief seemed to have performed the rejuvenation technique. As the star atlas fused with his body, he turned into a young and elegant man. He was also holding a long sword in his hand. Elizabeth looked at the young and elegant Hua Xing beside her. Her eyes were filled with endless memories, as well as a deep sense of love. She couldn't help but stretch out her old hand and stroke the young Hua Xing's short hair that had turned from white to black. An elegant smile appeared on the young Hua Xing's handsome face as he said softly, "If you have any last words, this is your last chance." Last words. Jiang Xiao looked at Hua Xing, who was about 20 years old, with a strange expression. The effect of the star map was indeed beyond his expectations. Jiang Xiao thought about it and said, "Do you know why Liana on Earth suddenly lost contact with you?" Hearing this, the smile on the young Hua Xing's face stiffened slightly. "Hee hee." Jiang Xiao grinned and said, Do you know why Ash didn't send you new members of the organization? Hearing this, Elisabeth's gentle face also became serious. Shu Jiangshao whistled and used the direction of the sea cliff. The young Hua Xing and his wife looked to the side, only to see a familiar figure. He was wearing a cloak, floating in the air, and slowly taking off his circle mask. Elisabeth froze for a moment and asked in disbelief, "Baze?" Baze put his hand into his pocket as if he was looking for something. Then, he stretched out his hand. There was no parchment, but a middle finger. Seeing this, Elisabeth's expression could not help but turn ugly. In front, Jiang Shao said, "Sophia Karen, I killed her." The two of them looked ugly as they turned to look at Jiang Shao. Jiang Shao continued to speak, enunciating each word. "Ash, I killed her. Liana, I killed her. Baze, I killed her. Nana Z, I killed her. And all the members you lost on the alien sphere, I killed them all." Hearing these words, the Hua Xing couple's expression became gloomy, no longer as elegant and calm as before. Jiang Shao pulled out a blood-colored giant blade from his chest and said, "I never fought you because of the trial. The story between us did not start from the alien sphere." Upon hearing this, the young Hua Xing suddenly laughed sarcastically and said, "So, did our organization kill your friends and relatives?" Jiang Zhao's expression turned sullen, and he said, "If you take this as your last words, remember what I'm going to say next." As he spoke, Jiang Shao raised his flower blade and pointed at Hua Xing's group of 4. "You, I killed you." As soon as he said that, in an instant, the battle roared and the WRMS surged. A gust of wind blew and lightning flashed. Just like second last said, "Hua Xing, only one of us can live." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.